Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is The Advocate, and today I'm an advocate for a complete summary of A Storm of Swords. You guys know the drill by now. This is a complete spoilerific summary of all the events that occur within the third book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, A Storm of Swords. Meaning that I will be spoiling all the events that occurred in the books prior to this one, and the books that follow. So if you have not read these books and do not want to be spoiled, then this video is not for you. However, if you have read these books and want a refresher, or if you have not read these books but just want to look cool in front of your friends and tell them that like, oh yeah, I've read these 1,000-page tomes, yep, that was me, then sit tight, because the Advocate's got you covered. Like, comment, and subscribe to support a small channel. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of the field once again. I've got a map of Westeros and Essos here, and our players here in the Game of Thrones, who are going to be our predominant participants here in the A Storm of Swords book. Just a couple of reminders once again, guys. I am not going off a script here. I do have a couple of notes to help me out with regards to what I wrote down during my second read-through of A Storm of Swords. However, I will likely get a couple of things wrong, seeing as how I'm predominantly going off of memory here. So if I do, I ask that you please be kind and let me know constructively down in the comment section down below what I potentially may have gotten wrong or what I just clearly did get wrong. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's get started. So previously in A Clash of Kings, we had Stannis, Melisandre, and Davos who lost at the Battle of Blackwater Bay. They were not able to take over King's Landing, and unfortunately, Stannis and Melisandre in particular had to go back to Dragonstone, while Davos here is somewhere lost out in the middle of the sea, as opposed to Tywin, Cersei, and Joffrey, who are recently reeling from a victory, having just won the Battle of Blackwater Bay, now with Marjorie, Loras, and Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns here in King's Landing. We've got a new Tyrell-Lannister partnership going on, something that'll be very scary for all of our other opponents here in the War of the Five Kings. Renly, one of the previous 5 kings, has died. Balon Greyjoy off in Pike. He's doing okay, but he did just lose his son that he wished wasn't his son, Theon Greyjoy, at the Battle of Winterfell, with Ramsay Bolton, or the recently revealed Ramsay Bolton, having taken Theon Greyjoy as his hostage. And Robb Stark, although he does seem to be doing pretty well for himself, something tells me he is coming off the peak of his powers here in Westeros, and he might be readying himself for a nasty, nasty downfall in this coming book. So the events of A Storm of Swords begin here at the Fists of the First Men. Samwell Tarly is here, along with our prologue point of view character named Chet. Chet is someone who previously worked for Maester Aemon, someone who was helping Maester Aemon with all of his tasks at the Wall. However, that job got taken away by Jon Snow and placed into the hands of Samwell Tarly, and Samwell Tarly was happy to help out Maester Aemon with all the things that he had doing. However, Chet did not like Jon Snow for that, in addition to Chet just not being a very good person. So Chet and a couple of his fellow pals decide to do a little impromptu mutiny here at the Fist of the First Men. They start plotting and scheming that they want to escape from the Fist of the First Men, but not before paying a little visit to Samwell Tarly and killing him right then and there before running away with some of the dogs and running away with some of the food. However, before Chet can sneak into Samwell Tarly's bedroom and stab our beloved pudgy individual right in the stomach, all of a sudden, our Night's Watch Rangers are woken up by not 1, not 2, but 3 blows of the horn. And everyone on camp is woken up. Because you see, when the horn is blown once, that usually indicates Night's Watch Rangers returning to camp. When it's blown twice, that indicates a wildling attack. However, if it's blown thrice, then that can only mean others are on the way. So Samwell Tarly awakes from his bed, and he's like, oh, what the heck is going on? And he sees Chet, like, oh, Chet, you're awake, perfect, let's take care of these others' problem. And Chet is just like, why, Samwell, why, others, perfect timing, blah. So everyone at the Fist of the First Men is attacked by the others, and unfortunately that means the end of quite a few of our Night's Watch companions here at the Fist of the First Men, including our pretty unlikable POV Chet here at the Wall. So while chaos is reigning supreme north of the Wall, Here south of the wall, we've got something a little bit less chaotic, but still kind of stressful, as Brienne and Jaime are currently on the run from a couple of River Run forces. Edmure Tully not being too pleased with Catelyn's decision to have Brienne of Tarth release Jaime from his prison and escort Jaime back to King's Landing, Edmure Tully, Catelyn's younger brother, sends out a couple of River Run forces after Brienne and Jaime in an effort to recapture the Kingslayer and bring them back to River Run. Brienne and Jaime see that they're currently being chased by our River Run forces. They give them a chase, and then eventually, Brienne, with some quick thinking, is able to roll a couple of boulders off of a cliff and sink one of our Riverland ships, meaning that Brienne and Jaime are good to go for the rest of their adventure. Along the way, Jaime starts saying some not nice things about Brienne. Jaime is still not a very likable individual, sleeping with his sister, pushing little boys off of windows, injuring Ned Stark's men, the usual king-slaying things. And Brienne, not wanting to put up with this abuse, just shuts Jaime up and is like, I can strike you down right here and now if I wanted to. And Jaime's like, go ahead. I have nothing to live for. And Brienne is like, don't tempt me. And Jaime's like, oh, I wish you would, you wench. And so off they go like an old married couple. Meanwhile, at King's Landing, Tyrion Lannister, having woken up from his recent injuries at the Battle of the Blackwater Bay, wakes up to find King's Landing a much different place than what it was prior to Tyrion Lannister falling asleep after the long and exhausting Battle of Blackwater Bay. He sees that his former mountain men, the mountain men that he had befriended in the first Game of Thrones book and stationed at places of security guard duty here at King's Landing, are no longer there. Bronn has now been made a knight, and a lot of his former companions are either no longer there or dead. So Tyrion is pretty much all alone at his bed. He's like, did they find Shay? Hopefully they haven't found Shay. Shay being the prostitute who's been sleeping with Tyrion this whole time. In a typical arrangement, Tyrion has been paying her in an effort to keep up this relationship, despite the fact that Shay has told him from the very beginning that their relationship is merely a financial transaction. So Tyrion, finding that Shay is still in safe hands, decides to have a chit-chat with his father about, hey, father, why didn't you come visit me at my bedside when I was, ill and bedridden after saving the city of King's Landing from Stannis' forces? And Tywin Lannister is like, I did see you. Maester Pycelle informed me that you would be fine, so I didn't need to see you anymore. And Tyrion's like, oh, well, thanks for being my father, Dad. Also, Father Tywin, I see you're writing a couple of letters. Who are those letters for? And Tywin's like, it's none of your business. Totally not a future red wedding foreshadowing or anything like that. So Tyrion is talking to his father, and he's like, all right, well, Jaime Lannister, presumed dead, but if he's not presumed dead, he is still a member of the Kingsguard. He is not allowed to father a son, he's not allowed to have a wife or lands, meaning that you currently have no heir to Casterly Rock, Sir Father. So, with no heir present, how about rewarding Casterly Rock to me, your son, who just, again, saved the city of King's Landing from Stannis' forces? And Tywin just mulls this over for a quick millisecond, and he's like, I would rather be consumed by maggots before mocking the family name and making you heir of Casterly Rock. And Tyrion's like, why? And Tywin says, why? You're a disgusting creature full of lust, low cunning, and envy. Men's laws give you the right to bear my name and call you a Lannister? Well, no gods or men can make you heir of Casterly Rock. Go, now, and speak no more of your rights. So Tyrion, depressed after another just lovely conversation with his father, walks out of the room, but before he walks out of the room, Tywin gives him one final warning. Oh, one more thing. The next whore I catch in your bed, I'll hang. And Tyrion just walks dejected. Oh, father-son relationships. Gotta love them. Meanwhile, Sansa, who is still at King's Landing, meets with Olenna and Marjorie Tyrell, the most recent arrivals into King's Landing. And after having a fairly good conversation with these Tyrells, thinking that, these Tyrells aren't so bad, and Olenna promising Sansa that, oh, Sansa, oh, you lovely child, wouldn't you like to leave this city of King's Landing and like to marry a Tyrell? And Sansa's super happy. She's like, oh boy, would I ever? However, when she then meets with Dantos later that evening, Sir Dantos gives Sansa a little dose of reality that, Sansa, these Tyrells may seem like flowers on the outside, but really, these flowers have thorns. They're just like the Lannisters, except more flowery. There's nothing different about them. And sure enough, Sansa comes soon to find out that had Sansa followed through with Olenna Tyrell's desire to marry Sansa off to a Tyrell, she would have been married off to not Loras Tyrell, who Sansa sees as this beautiful knight in shining armor, but rather Willis Tyrell, a Tyrell nonetheless, but someone who was recently paralyzed not too long ago by Oberyn Martell. And so Sansa realizing that, like, oh, the Tyrells just wanted to marry me off to this paralyzed individual just so that they can get their greedy little mitts on Winterfell, is dejected. But Ser Dantos reminds Sansa that, like, it's okay, Sansa, we're still going to get you out of this city. By the by, do you still have that hairnet that I gave you? Make sure you wear that during Joffrey's upcoming wedding with Marjorie Tyrell. So Sansa looks over this hairnet and she's like, all right, sure. I mean, it just looks like it's got little purple amethysts or whatever these things are called. But sure, yeah, I'll wear it to the wedding or whatever. Meanwhile, in the middle of Blackwater Bay, Ser Davos, surviving off of little crawfish or whatever kind of sea creatures he can find, stranded on this lowly rock in the middle of the Blackwater Bay, on the verge of death, is rescued by a Lyseni ship. And Davos waves to them and he's like, here, over here, save me, save me. And Davos is like, yes, yes, I come to see my king. And they're like, well, we gotta check to make sure. Which king? And Ser Davos says, the one true king, Stannis Baratheon. And of course they respond with, of course that's our king. So they board him up on their ship and take Ser Davos off to Dragonstone to be reunited with Stannis. Meanwhile, off in the north, Jon, who is now full BFFs with our wildlings, including a lovely young lady with red hair named Ygritte, comes to meet the king beyond the wall, Mance Rhaegar. Mance, being just a ordinary-looking man with long gray hair who likes to play on his harp, his little instrument, sees Jon and he's like, you? A turncloak? I've met you, Jon Snow. And Jon is like, oh, how have you met me before? Like, we've never met. He's like, oh, you didn't see me, but I was there in Winterfell at the beginning of the very first book of Game of Thrones. I was there to see King Robert Baratheon, and I saw your father, and I saw your family, and I saw you, Jon Snow. So Jon, you better have a good reason for wanting to join the Wildlings. And so Jon, thinking pretty quickly on his feet, gives Mance Rayder a kind of a BS reason for joining the Wildlings. Truthfully, one of the few good changes that the TV show does when compared to the source material that they change is Jon Snow's reasoning for joining the Wildlings. In the book, Jon Snow is like, Mance, like, my family was sitting up on the high table, and where did they seat the bastard? Way in the back, away from everybody else. They had no respect for me, so therefore I, in retribution for some sort of lack of respect that I believe I was owed, I decided that I'm going to become a wildling now. And Mance Rayder is like, makes perfect sense, no flaws in your logic, I like it, kid. Come join the Wildlings. But in the show, his reasoning is a little bit more realistic, and I think lends itself more credence to the actual theme of this whole show, which is the threat that everyone in Westeros seems to be neglecting or ignoring or avoiding. That is the true threat that's going to wipe everyone out, and that's the others. Jon Snow in the show, his reasoning for wanting to join the Wildlings is because he wants to join the people who are actually doing something about the others, who are actually confronting the others. And Mance Rayder is like, you're no longer going to wear the black. You're going to wear whatever you want. Wear some wool. And I think that reason is a much better reason for wanting to join the Wildlings than just, oh, you know, my family didn't love me. I'm just a little bastard and they sat me in the back. Boo-hoo-hoo. Well, from one climate to another, we're meeting up with Daenerys now. Her and Jorah Mormont and her new companion Arstan Whitebeard and his knight Strong Belwas are leaving Qarth, traveling by sea, and heading off to Pentos. However, Jorah Mormont, still not trusting this Arstan Whitebeard completely, continues to warn Daenerys like, Dany, there's something about this Arstan Whitebeard that just strikes me as a little suspicious. I don't know if I should trust him. Why are we heading back to Pentos? Dany, our fight is in Westeros, not going back to Pentos, and I know a way we can help you reclaim your land of Westeros. And Dany is like, all right, well, shoot, tell me, brother, what's up? So Jorah Mormont tells Dany about these soldiers, these super soldiers called the Unsullied. These soldiers that will do whatever they're told, whatever they're tasked, and will not balk at anything and will not question the decision-making of their master. And Dany's like, oh, yeah, I could totally use these big, strong people who are well-disciplined and will not backtalk me. Where are they? And he's like, go to Astapor. You will find them there. So Dany changes course and decides to head off with Arstan Whitebeard and Jorah Mormont off to Astapor. But Jorah Mormont, who's gotten a little too overly chummy with Dany over these past couple of books, starts thinking of himself as an actual White Knight, like Arstan Whitebeard over here. And it's like, this Dany, she really likes to come to me for advice. She even listened to me when I told her that she should go to Astapor to buy these Unsullied. Maybe she likes me. So, Jorah Mormont, completely unable to read the room. At one point when he's meeting up with Dany, he decides to kiss Dany on the mouth. And Dany, pissed off, understandably so, that this man just kissed her unsolicitedly, is like, never do that ever again, or I will have you killed. And Jorah is like, my apologies, Dany. So anyway, that's happening there. All the while, Bran, who is currently on his own adventure, heading north towards north of the Wall to see the Three-Eyed Crow, the Three-Eyed Crow being this individual who Bran continues to have visions of during his nighttime sleeps, in addition to his visions of him warging into his wolf, Summer, having these wolf dreams where he is actually his wolf, Summer, is consistently woken up by Jojen, being reminded by Jojen, who is currently traveling with Bran, Jojen and Mira Reed being the Crannogmen, alongside with Hodor, continues to remind Bran that, Bran, you probably should not be overly relying on your wolf dreams, getting too lost in your wolf dreams, and sooner or later you'll actually become the wolf and cease to be the boy. And Bran is like, no, but I want to have 4 legs and I want to run around and do all these things that I can't do. I'm such a sad, sad boy with 0 legs. So Bran, Jojen, and Mira continue to travel north, and as they do, they relay stories to Bran about Rhaegar Targaryen and the tourneys that he participated in, and a little bit of foreshadowing here about how Rhaegar at one point decided to name the most beautiful woman that he had ever laid eyes on at the end of one of the tourneys, and gave his little flower bead to a certain lady that unfortunately Mira and Jojen Reed don't really elaborate on because it's a very sad story, but they relay stories to Bran, and Bran is all eager to hear these stories as they travel north. Oh, and Rickon continues to go who knows where with Osha. We'll come to find the answer to that in A Dance with Dragons. All the while, off in Dragonstone, Davos, recently arrived, continues to think over all the things that happened at the Battle of Blackwater Bay, how things went wrong, how they lost, and he faults their defeat on Melisandre. Everything that has gone wrong for Stannis in this War of the Five Kings, he lays on Melisandre. In his mind, anyway, he doesn't tell her. So at one point, he sees this little boy named Edric Storm, who is currently being imprisoned on Dragonstone as well. Edric Storm is this little boy who is Robert Baratheon's most well-known bastard-born child, who was living at Storm's End. However, Stannis took this boy from Storm's End and took him with him to Dragonstone on Melisandre's behest, as Melisandre informs Stannis that they need blood of royalty for their sacrifice in order to kill Edric Storm and revive the stone dragon that lies within the castle walls of Dragonstone. Stannis undecided whether or not he wants to follow through on burning and killing this little boy in an effort to ride this dragon that's made of stone. Davos, wanting nothing to do with that and wanting no child to die, goes to see this little boy, sees that he's a sweet little boy, and takes it upon himself that, you know what, Melisandre keeps trying to lead Stannis astray. I need to do something about it. So he begins to plot how to kill Melisandre. And at one point, as he's about to pull together this plan of trying to kill the Red Priestess, Axel Florent, one of the men under Stannis' payroll, enters into Davos' quarters and immediately puts Davos under arrest, as Melisandre, being one step ahead, had seen Davos' impending assassination of Melisandre in her flames, her magical flames. So they arrest Davos and put him in jail. Meanwhile, off in the Riverlands, Arya, who's currently on the run after having escaped Harrenhal with her new BFFs, Hot Pie and Gendry, enters a wolf dream similar to Bran, where she wargs into her dire wolf, Nymeria. Even despite the fact that Nymeria and Arya are no longer together, Arya somehow still has the ability to warg into her still alive dire wolf and kill the brave companions that are giving Arya, Hot Pie, and Gendry chase, as they had escaped from Harrenhal and these people were chasing after Arya. But the direwolf easily disposes of these people, kills them with a couple of wolf bites from her wolf pack, and Arya and Hot Pie and Gendry continue to be on their way. However, not before they eventually get lost here along the Red Fork at one point, and then eventually get captured, not by the brave companions, but this time by a crew of people known as the Brotherhood Without Banners, a crew that had been sent out by Ned Stark in the first book in order to reel in Gregor Clegane when Gregor Clegane was burning the Riverlands. This crew, who is now without King Robert Baratheon, but is still prowling around the Riverlands, decides to take Arya, Hot Pie, and Gendry as their prisoners in an effort to potentially ransom them off or allow them to join their gang or just do whatever. However, before they know who they really have, Arya at one point notices that Harwin, one of Ned Stark's men, is currently traveling with the Brotherhood Without Banners, and Harwin recognizes Arya, and they're like, "Brothers, Brotherhood Without Banners, Lemon Cloak, Angie, Thomas Seven Streams, put your harp down, look who this is Arya Stark." They're like, "Arya Stark of Winterfell?" It's like, "Yes, Arya Stark of Winterfell. We should totally ransom her off to her mother and collect some gold." And Arya's like, "What? You're gonna sell me out? But what about, your former partnership with my father, with your lord, Ned Stark?" And Harwin is like, "Ned Stark is dead. I no longer respond to the North. I am now a brother without a banner." And Arya is like, "No." And speaking of Arya's family, Robb Stark has currently returned back to Riverrun after doing a little bit of cleansing here in the Westerlands. Catelyn currently still being imprisoned after her decision to once again release Jaime Lannister from his prison. Catelyn is held within the walls of Riverrun as punishment for her decision making. But when Robb returns, he's like, "Mom, why are you in jail?" It's like, "Oh, I let Jaime Lannister go." And Robb takes the news rather well. He's like, "Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I guess we did need to get my sisters back, your daughters back. Yeah, that's totally cool." And Catelyn is like, "Huh, you're playing this rather cool. What's going on here, son of mine, King of the North, Robb Stark?" And so Robb officially introduces Catelyn to someone she did not intend to be introduced to this early in her son's life. And Robb Stark says to his mother, "Mom, I want to introduce you. This is my wife, Jane Westerling." And Catelyn is horrified at what she's hearing. "Robb, you idiot. You just lost the phrase. Oh my gosh." Robb Stark broke his betrothal with his Frey companions. Thus, this makes complete sense within Catelyn's mind why a lot of the Freys decided to ditch Riverrun a couple of days ago. Something about a broken betrothal? I don't know. Something was going on. Catelyn didn't really pay much mind to it. She just saw that they were trampling over the Stark banner, these Freys, and she's like, "Oh, that's weird. Why would the Freys trample over the Stark banner? Something must have pissed them off." This is why they're pissed off. Robb Stark literally pissed on their cereal by saying to them that, "Oh yeah, your little Frey girl, yeah, I don't want anything to do with the Frey wife. I want me a Westerling wife. Yum, yum, yum." So, Freys didn't take that too well, so they retreated back to the twins. All the while, Robb Stark has essentially lost half his forces. Now, once again, and I'm going to try not to compare the books with the TV show too much, and if I do, I'm so sorry. But one of the deviations that the show makes from the book, and this is one of the many deviations that make the TV show less good when compared to the much superior book source material product, is that Robb's reasoning for wanting to marry Jane Westerling. In the book, Robb Stark, after hearing the news of the death of Bran and Rickon, well, death, as Theon didn't really kill Bran and Rickon, but Robb, being super sad after hearing this news, had recently taken over the Crag, recently taken over a couple of towns, the Spicer town, the town where the Westerlings were seated at, and not knowing where to turn, he was crying tears, just crying all sorts of sadness. And Jane Westerling, the closest woman that was there, the closest woman that would listen to Robb Stark, was hearing all of this. And having nowhere else to turn, Robb Stark, in an air of judgment, he is overly comforted, and Jane Westerling comforts him in a specific way where Robb Stark essentially loses his virginity. And because Robb Stark lost his virginity, he didn't want to essentially spoil Jane Westerling, having stolen Jane Westerling's virginity. So because of that, not wanting to dishonor her, Robb Stark decided to marry Jane Westerling right then and there, so that it was okay for Jane Westerling to no longer be a virgin. Again, this is medieval times where virginity is held in such high regard, and if you are not a virgin, then you're seen, and you're not married and you're not a virgin, you're seen as this just kind of disgusting creature. So that was the reasoning for the book. The show takes the much less cool, less layered approach of, "Oh yeah, Robb Stark just saw this hot girl out in the battlefield and decided to fall in love and have sex and get married. Heck yeah." And it's so much less layered. there's so many more layers to the book reasoning for why Robb Stark decided to break his betrothal when compared to the show that I think the show just really did this part a disservice. Anyway, Catelyn informs Robb that this is definitely not good and they need to win the Freys back. So Robb and Catelyn try to devise a way, okay, what can we do here in order to appease Walder Frey for this thing that he'll essentially take as a slight against him? Because again, Walder Frey is not a man that takes slights against him unseriously. No, he takes these slights very seriously. Speaking of betrothals and marriage proposals, Tywin Lannister, trying to make the most of his family situation and trying to make the most of his time here in King's Landing, decides to order up a couple of marriages for his sons and daughters, including trying to marry off Cersei Lannister with Willis Tyrell, the Tyrell that was previously proposed to Sansa. Tywin, catching wind of the Tyrell's desire to marry Sansa off to Willis in an effort to get Winterfell, wants to stop the Tyrells before they even try to negotiate this marriage pact, and is like, no, you know what? I'm going to marry Willis to Cersei. That way I'm going to stop the Tyrells in their tracks from trying to get Winterfell. And then, because Tywin wants Winterfell, he's like, oh, but don't worry, Sansa's not going to stay unmarried. Because Tyrion, fellow son of mine, you will be the one to marry Sansa. And Tyrion's like, what? I want nothing to do with... What? This is stupid. What? Sansa's a little girl. She's like 12 or 13. That's disgusting, you old man. And he's like, oh, well, when she comes of age, you'll put a son in her. And when that son becomes a grown-up, he'll be the Lord of Winterfell, and thus the Lannisters will have positions all over Winterfell. And Tyrion is like, you're disgusting, you old man. I hate you, father. Anyway, while we're on the subject of hatred, why aren't you super hateful and mad about the Westerlings? I heard that they ran off with Robb Stark and decided to marry Robb Stark, thus take away any potential claim of Winterfell that you think you have, because whatever claim Winterfell will have will probably lie at the doorstep of whatever son that Jane Westerling and Robb Stark decide to have. So Tywin he doesn't smile, but he almost smiles. Because Tyrion is like, don't they know anything about the reigns of Castamere, how you, Tywin Lannister, decided to essentially silence a couple of petty lords who didn't want to pay their taxes to you, and so you burnt their towns and made it into a song called The Reigns of Castamere? And Tywin is like, oh, rest assured, the Westerlings know about the reigns of Castamere. And so it's clear that Tywin has a couple of schemes that he has yet to reveal to Tyrion. Anyway, Tyrion is forced to marry Sansa in this very awkward wedding. Neither of one of them want to be married to each other. Tywin is just like reassuring himself, like, yes, Winterfell will be ours. And as a gift, well, he creates a wedding gift, but not for his son Tyrion. He creates a wedding gift more for himself by smelting down the ice sword that was previously Ned Stark's and smelting it down into two separate swords. Two swords made of Valyrian steel. One that is intended for Jaime Lannister whenever he returns to King's Landing, as Tywin Lannister is now aware that Jaime is on his way back, and another Valyrian sword that he will reward to Joffrey whenever Joffrey gets married to Margaery Tyrell. So yeah, all sorts of awkward wedding shenanigans are going on in King's Landing. Tyrion at one point is like, all right, I guess I have to do my duty and seal the deal here with Sansa. And Sansa just kind of in tears, and it's so sad, just kind of taking off her dress. Tyrion is like, no, I'm not going to force you. And Sansa's like, oh, okay, thank you. Anyway, back in the Riverlands, Robb Stark, having found out that a couple of his men had killed Willem Lannister and Tion Frey, two individuals who are currently imprisoned by Robb Stark, who he was going to ransom off to the Lannisters in exchange for a couple other northern prisoners, are now dead because the Karstarks, some members of the Karstark family, wanting a couple of Lannisters to be dead in retribution for the Karstarks having lost a couple of their own family members in the Battle of the Whispering Woods in the first book, that battle where Jaime Lannister was captured, wanted to kill Jaime Lannister, and now that Jaime Lannister is no longer present, they kill the next best thing, and they kill some of the Lannister prisoners. Robb Stark, disgusted with Rickard Karstark and his children for wanting to do this murder behind Robb Stark's back, decides to kill Rickard Karstark and just teaching everyone else a lesson about what happens when you defy the king in the north and that we do things my way. We're going to ransom off prisoners, not kill them. Jaime and Brienne still on the run, heading out towards King's Landing away from the Riverlands. Brienne gets a little too fed up with Jaime's disgusting insults, calling Brienne a wench one too many times, and Brienne and Jaime get into a little bit of a sword fight. Jaime, thinking that despite the fact that he's chained, he can easily overcome Brienne, is surprised that Brienne is a lot stronger and a lot more skilled than he gave her credit for. Brienne more than holds her own, and in fact, is pretty much winning this impromptu sword fight, this impromptu battle. They keep going until at one point Jaime is down for the count, and it looks like Brienne is about to finally get the upper hand on Jaime, until both Brienne and Jaime get captured by a couple of nasty individuals from the Brave Companions. And Jaime is like, "Brave Companions, it's me, Jaime Lannister, Tywin Lannister's son, his famous son, the one son that he actually loves. Take me back to King's Landing and I'll give you all the Lannister gold. The Lannisters always pay their debts." And Vargo Hoat is like, "I don't care about your stupid gold. I want your hand." So he commands one of his men called Zalo to take out this giant butcher's axe, and without thinking, cuts Jaime Lannister's hand off, his arm, part of his arm. And Jaime Lannister screams, because not only did he lose his hand, he lost his sword hand, he lost his right hand. And Jaime Lannister is powerless as these Brave Companions immediately overpower Brienne and Jaime and take them back to their castle in Harrenhal. Meanwhile, off in Essos, Dany sees the full power of the Unsullied in Astapor, decides to question the slave masters, having recently discovered that not everywhere in Essos is free of slaves, and she's like, "Oh, these are slaves? How horrible!" So she wants to buy all the Unsullied slaves from underneath these Astapor slave masters, and the Astapor slave masters are like, "Sure, what do you got?" And she's like, "Oh, I've got everything on my ship." And they're like, I guess we can make a deal. And it's like, "Also, I'll give you one dragon." And they're like, "Boy, do we have a deal." You see, Dany's newly hatched dragons are no longer hatchlings, but they're growing into young, budding teenage dragons. They're getting bigger and bigger. And these dragons will someday be fully grown adult dragons. And everyone in Westeros and Essos, despite the fact that no one has seen a dragon for more than 150 years, people are very well aware of what chaos these dragons ensued on all of Planetos. So slave masters, knowing the full power of a dragon, they're like, "Oh boy, if I have a dragon, I'll rule the world." So they decide to give Dany all of the Unsullied slaves that they have in exchange for, like a lot of the stuff that Dany has, but really that's just icing on the cake, because what they really want is one of Dany's dragons. So Dany does away with one of her dragons, and Arsene Whitebeard is like, "What are you doing? That's your ticket into getting into Westeros, you fool! You let go one of your dragons!" And she's like, "No, watch this. Drogon Dracarys." And right then and there, this dragon that was misbehaving and not necessarily wanting to go with his new slave master burns the slave master right then and there, burns the Astapor slave masters, and Dany gets to keep all of her stuff and her dragons and her Unsullied free of charge. So Dany and her new Unsullied companions decide to venture forth towards the Yunkai in an effort to collect more Unsullied on the way, and also do away with any slave mastering going on in any of these other Essos cities. Meanwhile, Arya, traveling around the Riverlands with Tom Seven Streams, Lem Lemoncloak, Angie, and the Brotherhood Without Banners, decides to have a couple of conversations with them. At some point, they tell her about the Lannister song, The Rains of Castamere, and Arya's like, "Oh, what's the Rains of Castamere?" So Thomas Seven Streams decides to play it on his harp, the "Who are you?" But da, da, da. I don't know the lyrics to that song, but you know The Rains of Castamere, you've heard it before. And Arya's like, "Oh, what a creepy song." And Thomas Seven Streams is like, "Oh, little lady, if you ever hear this song, The Rains of Castamere, bad things are bound to happen." And Arya's like, "Oh, I hope I never hear that song." And Thomas Seven Streams like, "Oh, sure you don't hear The Rains of Castamere anytime soon." So they start talking about stories about how they got their start, how they were formerly Ned Stark's men, but now a lot of them are just kind of lawless and don't really know what to do, don't really know who to follow. They're just kind of doing their own thing. Arya does get a little bit of foreshadowing from the Ghost of Highheart, this creepy old lady that they see around a campfire. She tells Arya stories about Balon Greyjoy, something about Balon Greyjoy swaying along a bridge, and maybe that this crow who likes to feast, this eye of a crow, this crow's eye. I don't know, something about a crow's eye here, and a swaying bridge with Balon Greyjoy. Something about a wolf without a head, a little girl with serpents in her hair, a hairnet of amethyst, and then a lady, a dark and hateful lady, a lady of a stone-cold heart. Do we know of such a stone-hearted lady? Maybe somewhere down the line we'll know about this lady? Yes, a lot of just on a reread, a lot of on-the-nose foreshadowing, but on a first read-through, just a lot of things that seem like pure gibberish to both Arya and the reader. But all this to say that at one point, the Brotherhood Without Banners is currently going around the lands, putting to death a couple of lawless people. And at one point, someone who is under arrest comes to them. Someone who was formerly a hound, Sandor Clegane, comes into the encampment, imprisoned, chained by the Brotherhood Without Banners, and Arya immediately recognizes this man as like, I know who you are. Meanwhile, north of the wall, Sam continues venturing further south as he tries to make his way towards Castle Black after all the chaos that ensued at the Fist of the First Men. And Jon Snow, Ygritte, and Mance Rayder come to the Fist of the First Men to see a whole bunch of dead Night's Watch companions and evidence that there was an attack by the others. So Mance Rayder immediately turns to Jon, angry with him because Jon at one point told him that the Night's Watch had been venturing north of the wall, just doing a simple ranging, not telling him that they were actually in search of what to do about the others. So Mance immediately turns to Jon, pissed off at him like, Jon, you lied to me. Like, I will have no more of these lies. What were these individuals doing? So Jon is just straight up with him and is like, yeah, we were ranging for others. It's like, Jon, why did you lie to me? Okay, tell me the truth, and I'll know you're lying. How many men are at each castle? So Jon, knowing that I can't really lie, just tells Mance Rayder how it is, that there's not too many men. So Mance is like, all right, good. I can tell you're not lying to me. Because, oh boy, if you lied to me, Rattleshirt will love to kill you right here and there. Rattleshirt being one of the few wildlings that does not like the fact that this Turncloak is here. But Ygritte comes in clutch here because at one point when Mance Rayder is about to give him a huge yelling lesson here, Ygritte just kind of tells Mance, like, Mance, calm down. He's my boyfriend. We're lovers. And Mance is like, all right. You lovers go and do your loving thing. So Jon and Ygritte along their way as they venture forth towards the wall with the intention of climbing the wall with their other wildling companions. They make love here and there at a couple of occasions. Good job, Jon. She's quite a catch in my opinion. You did good. So yeah, Jon is a little bit in love. They make their way down towards the wall. They climb the wall, make their way south of the wall, and come across a little village here south of the wall where there's just a lowly villager here just minding his own business. And so in order to truly test Jon Snow's loyalty to the wildlings, he gets charged with, all right, Jon, we're south of the wall. Here's this lowly villager. Go ahead. Kill this villager, this old villager. And Jon is like, oh, I can't do that. I don't know. Why would I do that? It's like, you should kill this villager. Meanwhile, across from this lake, Bran, who's currently staying in a tower just right across, he sees a commotion off in the distance, doesn't know what's going on, goes to sleep, and he wakes up in the body of his dire wolf, Summer. So Summer, knowing something's going on here with the wildlings, Jon refuses to kill this villager, so Ygritte kills the villager for him. And Ygritte's like, what's going on? What's gone into you, Jon? I thought you were my boyfriend. I thought we were lovers. And Jon is like, oh, we are. I just couldn't kill this man. So the wildlings wanting nothing more to do with this Jon Snow. It's like, he's a Turncloak. Formerly a crow, always a crow. So as they are about to kill Jon Snow, who saves him, but none other than Summer / Bran. Summer hops in, decides to kill a couple of wildlings. I'm not sure if he kills them or just maims and injures some of the wildling companions. Jon is like, oh, now's my chance. I gotta get away. I gotta run away. So Jon mounts a horse and rides off towards Castle Black to inform everyone of what has gone on, about how the wildlings have crossed south of the wall and how there's a bunch of wildlings headed their way towards Castle Black in an effort to take over the wall, and everyone all the wildlings cross en masse through Castle Black. So as Jon makes his way towards Castle Black on his horse, he gets shot in the knee by an arrow, and he sees that the arrow was shot potentially by Ygritte, as Ygritte looks heartbroken and sad but angry at Jon. But not only does Jon see his ex-girlfriend super sad and hurt, but he also sees in the distance a wolf. A wolf who he at first thinks is Robb Stark's direwolf, but he takes a closer look, and then it dawns on him. He kind of has like a split-second aha moment, and he believes he sees Summer, Bran Stark's direwolf. But Jon doesn't have too much time to think about it as he's continuing to gallop away towards Castle Black. So Bran, waking up, he communicates to his companions, he communicates to Jojen and Mira that like, oh, I thought I saw Jon Snow? Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I see Jon? And everyone's like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I think you're saying things, Bran. But Bran is like, Jon, is that you? And Jon on the other end is like, Bran, is that you? So a close encounter, one of the very many close encounters that you see throughout the series. This series is so good at making us want to see a reunion happen at some point. You know, the only point in time where all these characters were kind of together under the same roof was at the very beginning of the first book. They've all kind of gone their own separate ways, and we're all just waiting for the moment when even just two of these characters interact with each other once again, and the payoff will be so good. But Sam, who's north of the wall, has no time to think about anything that's going on south of the wall, because when he's at Craster's Keep, at one point, there's a mutiny that happens. They arrive at Craster's Keep just kind of as a rest stop on their way back to the wall, and a lot of the Night's Watch companions who are traveling with Jeor Mormont and Sam get fed up with Craster over the fact that Craster is withholding a lot of food, withholding a lot of supplies from them, making them sleep on the floor, just making them just die out in the cold. Night's Watch companions, having suffered an attack from the others, are fed up with Craster, so they overpower Craster, slit his throat, and then sexually assault. Just a disgusting display of humanity. They sexually assault a lot of Craster's wives and daughters, and it's this wild moment of chaotic mutiny here in the Night's Watch. At one point, Jeor Mormont gets murdered in the chaos. Samwell Tarly is very, very sad. He's like, Jeor, the Lord Commander, no, what are you going to do? So Jeor Mormont, in Sam's arms, tells Sam, like, Sam, please tell my son, my stupid son, Jeor Mormont, who's off somewhere, tell him that I forgive him and that I love him. And so Jeor dies in Sam's arms, and it's very sad. But a lot of the wives who are there with Craster, like, run along now, no time. Like, the others are coming. And Sam is like, how do you know? It's like, I feel it in my bones. You better get out of here, boy. So they pretty much shoo Sam out of here, alongside with a few of the Night's Watchmen who decided not to join along with the mutiny. Sam runs away, but not before coming in contact with this wildling young lady, this wildling former wife, former daughter of Craster, named Gilly. Gilly sees Sam and is like, oh, are you leaving? Take me with you. Take me and my son with you. You see, Craster, being a man of simple pleasures, he likes women, but he doesn't like men. And so any time that he impregnated one of his wives and they gave him a daughter, he decided for that daughter to stay. But if one of his wives ever gave him a son, he took out the son in the middle of the woods and would kill that son. Just a disgusting person this Craster is. But anyway, Sam, Gilly, and Gilly's baby, they run south of the wall. At one point, they do get attacked by others, but who comes in to save them? But none other than this strange man who's not Benjen Stark, but this strange man wearing a cloak who's got cold fingers and cold eyes. This individual who comes by the name of Cold Hands. Cold Hands rescues Sam and is like, come with me, Sam. Come with me, Gilly and Gilly's baby. Come with me. I'll take you out of here. And Sam is like, oh, thank you, sir. Cold Hands. Cold Hands. Thank you, Cold Hands. So they make their way towards some unknown destination, towards the wall, perhaps south of the wall. We'll see soon enough. Meanwhile, out in the Riverlands, Arya observes Sandor Clegane as he engages in a trial by combat with none other than this man known as Beric Dondarrion. Beric Dondarrion, who looks a tad bit different than last time Arya saw him. Arya previously saw Beric Dondarrion and Thoros of Myr, an attorney in the first book, Game of Thrones. Both Beric and Thoros looked much younger, much more spry. Here, Beric Dondarrion looks a little bit more beat up. He's got kind of his head caved in. He looks definitely like he's been dead a couple of times, so to speak. So this Beric Dondarrion engages in a trial by combat with Sandor. Arya really wants his Sandor to die. At one point, Beric Dondarrion's sword comes alive with fire. Sandor Clegane wants nothing to do with this fire. He's very scared of fire, but Sandor Clegane is able to overpower and beat Beric Dondarrion in this trial by combat, as the Brotherhood Without Banners essentially put a bunch of crimes against Sandor Clegane, and Sandor is like, I didn't do half that stuff, but Sandor won, and they're like, all right, I guess the Lord of Light has blessed Sandor Clegane with this trial by combat, so Sandor is not guilty of all these crimes. And Arya is so pissed off. She hates Sandor Clegane. It's like, that's not true. And this horrible man, he killed the butcher's boy. He killed Micah in the first book, when Micah was just an innocent boy, and Joffrey had him killed. Sandor Clegane was the one who did the execution. And they're like, sorry, little girl, for the moment. The Lord of Light must have some other purpose for him. And Arya's like, no, tell them, Sandor, tell them what you did. You're a stupid, horrible man. I hate you, you stupid, horrible man. And Sandor just admits to Arya, like, yes, of course I killed that little boy. It was me. I was the murderer. Just kind of admitting to his crime right then and there in front of everybody. Meanwhile, Robb calls over lame Lothar Frey and Walder Rivers from the twins in order to renegotiate a potential renewed partnership between the Freys and the Starks, in hopes of Robb being able to reclaim his hold on Westeros, as Robb has lost not just the Freys, but he also lost a third of his forces in this alleged Battle of Duskendale. Apparently, Roose Bolton had sent Glover and Tallheart to Duskendale, where they inevitably got thwomped by Randall Tarly, and Robb Stark is like, who sent them to Duskendale? And Roose Bolton's over there in the corner like, So Robb Stark, needing to get the Freys again in this renewed partnership, discusses terms with the Freys. Lame Lothar Frey and Walder Rivers are like, all right, yeah, Walder Frey will take you back, but on 2 conditions. 1, you have to give Walder Frey an apology in person. And 2, we require the hand in marriage of someone from your encampment. So they all look at Edmure Tully, and Edmure Tully is like, what, me? I have to marry one of those Frey swine? And so the Freys are like, So like Edmure is like, all right, fine, I'll do it. So Robb Stark and Catelyn agree to Walder Rivers and Lame Lothar Frey's terms, but not before burying, or more appropriately, burning the body of Hoster Tully, Catelyn Tully's now deceased father, out at the river as Brynden Blackfish Tully, Catelyn's uncle, shot a flaming arrow into the sky and it landed into a rowboat holding the body of Hoster Tully. Hoster Tully was pretty old. He was getting sick as well. He was an ailing old man, so it was only a matter of time before he died. Prior to his death, Hoster Tully was talking to Catelyn something about Tansy and Lysa and a baby, and Catelyn didn't really fully understand everything that her father was saying, but the maester assured her that, oh yeah, he's just an old man. He's speaking on some random things from his childhood. It's like, oh, okay. I don't know who this Tansy is, but must be someone important in Hoster Tully's past. All the while, back in Dragonstone, Davos still seething from Melisandre's discovery that Davos was going to attempt to murder Melisandre after discovering that Melisandre wants to burn Edric Storm in order to revive this famous stone dragon from Dragonstone. Davos is like, this is all sorts of insanity. Have we learned nothing from Summerhall? Have we learned nothing from the mistakes of the past? Edric Storm needs to be freed and rescued. So Melisandre goes to visit Davos in the middle of his jail cell in the middle of the night and basically tries to comfort Davos, like, why do you fear, Sir Davos? Like, do not fear anything. Edric Storm will be with the Lord of Light. And it's like, get away from me, you crazy lady. You're bat poop insane. So Melisandre sees that Davos is very noble to Stannis' cause. So at one point, Stannis decides to finally free Davos from his jail cell. He decides to burn Alistair Florent for just his misdeeds, and Stannis raises Davos not just as an onion knight, but as one of Stannis' knights. He is now the Lord of the Rainwood and hand of the king, the one true king, Stannis Baratheon. Because you see, Stannis now communicates to his hand of the king that, Sir Davos, I intend to invade Claw Isle in this next battle of this upcoming war. And Davos is like, what are you smoking? There is nothing on Claw Isle. What are you talking about, Claw Isle? This is ridiculous. And Stannis, being the true menace, he's like, no, Sir Davos, I'm talking about the real war, the real battle, the battle against the Great Other. And Davos is like, have you lost your marbles? And Melisandre is like, yes, the great battle against the Great Other. And I, as a reader, I'm like, yes, the one true king, Stannis, my lord, my king. You're the only one that does something about the others. Everyone else is just so preoccupied about these little petty power squabbles. But you, Sir Stannis, are the true menace. He also fills 3 leeches with Edric Storm's blood into a campfire that Melisandre has created for these leeches, and each one of these leeches is supposed to represent the death of one of the 3 remaining kings, those being Joffrey Baratheon, Balon Greyjoy, and Robb Stark. Speaking of Joffrey Baratheon, Oberyn Martell with a retinue of 300 Dornishmen come to King's Landing because they are invited guests of the royal wedding that is soon to happen between Joffrey Baratheon and Margaery Tyrell. Tyrion Lannister with his squire Podrick Payne go out to meet this Oberyn Martell. They're a little bit confused as to why Oberyn Martell is here and not the actual Lord of Dorne, that being Doran Martell. Oberyn Martell assures them that, like, oh, there is nothing to worry about. It is only me, Oberyn Martell. Doran Martell is much too sick with gout, which he is, to come to the wedding. So instead, it will be me. So Tyrion is like, all right, great. Well, that's totally not suspicious. So what can we do for you, Red Viper, Oberyn Martell? So Oberyn Martell decides to tell this story about when he was a little boy. He and his sister Elia Martell visited Tyrion when he was just a little baby off at Casterly Rock. And essentially, Oberyn Martell, thinking that he was going to see the great monster of Casterly Rock, the great monster of Tywin Lannister, and he was just kind of annoyed that it was just this little baby Tyrion Lannister, and Tyrion is like, oh, you're full of jokes. Great. So Obviously, the Lannisters, Cersei, and Tywin are not very happy with seeing Oberyn here. They expected Doran Martell, so they know something is up. And the person who's definitely pissed off at seeing Oberyn Martell is Mace Tyrell, Marjorie Tyrell's father. The Tyrells and Martells have this long-standing feud that has gone for centuries, for generations, but in one point in the recent past, Oberyn Martell, using a poison weapon, he defeated Willis Tyrell, one of Mace Tyrell's sons, in this tourney battle, and because Oberyn Martell was using this poison weapon, it inadvertently caused some sort of nervous system damage to Willis Tyrell, so now Willis Tyrell is a paralyzed person, whereas Oberyn Martell kinda walks, talks, and just does all these things. Off in the east, Dany, now with her new traveling Unsullied forces, decides to make her way towards Yunkai. Here at Yunkai, she is met with a sizable resistance by a couple of leaders of the band called the Stormcrows. The Stormcrows are essentially the slave masters in charge of the city of Yunkai. One of these Stormcrows includes this handsome blue-haired young man named Dario Naharis. And Dario and his famous Stormcrows kind of meet Dany out here outside of the walls of Yunkai, and Dany is like, "Open your doors, let us inside, or else we'll take this city on the morrow." And Dario and the two Stormcrow companions are like, "Ha, come back a different day." So Dany takes this as an insult, so as she's preparing her Unsullied for battle, Dario, in a change of conscience, or maybe perhaps his own schemes, he kills his two Stormcrow companions and delivers the heads of his two Stormcrow companions to Dany. And is like, "Dany, look what I brought you. I brought you the heads of these two former Stormcrows. The city of Yunkai is yours. Do as you please." So Dany is like, "Oh, thank you very much, my sexy new blue-haired man." So Dany's Unsullied men easily infiltrate the city of Yunkai, take it over, and Dany now has a growing Unsullied army and has freed more slaves. Hooray for tearing down slavery. Unfortunately, now they have a bunch of mouths to feed, so despite the fact that we have this really cool scene within the book and the TV show where these slaves kind of come out of the city of Yunkai and call her mother Misa, Misa, and are so happy to see her, Dany now has a growing problem with she has thousands of mouths to feed now. A lot of them which can't really carry weapons, a lot of them which are not of super use to them. So Dany now has to find new sanctuary fast, or else her growing army of not just Unsullied, but her growing army of slaves is going to eat through her stores of food pretty quickly. So taking the advice from either Arson or Jorah, her and her Unsullied companions and all her other companions head towards Meereen, where she hears that there's sanctuary there and a huge bounty of food that is able to feed all of their people. Off in the Riverlands, Arya gets kidnapped by Sandor Clegane. After wanting nothing more to do with the Brotherhood without banners, she attempts an escape, and Sandor Clegane catches her and decides to run off with her, now with the intention of ransoming Arya off to Catelyn Stark. Hearing about this new wedding that's going to happen at the Twins, he decides to head off to the Twins with Arya in an effort to sell Arya off for some gold. And Jaime and Brienne, having been captured by the Brave Companions, arrive at Harrenhal, where they are greeted by none other than totally not suspicious, just lowly vampire, leech blood-sucking, disgusting Roose Bolton. Roose, you're one creepy Northman. You know that, Roose? So Roose Bolton tells Qyburn being a maester without a chain, to clean Jaime's stump. Jaime currently is handless, armless, if you remember right. And so it's gotten infected, so Qyburn is cleaning it. Jaime screams. Jaime is not himself anymore. And so this Jaime who's been weakened, this armless Jaime who just wants to clean himself of all the filth that he has accumulated over the trials of the road, he decides to take a bath with Brienne. Brienne is already in one of the stone baths in Harrenhal, and Jaime decides to take a bath alongside with Brienne. Brienne is like, "Go to some other tub. What are you doing here?" And Jaime's like, "No, this one will do just fine." So Jaime and Brienne have this awkward bathtub scene that immediately turns into one of the best scenes in the book, because it is here where Jaime, who over the course of the road has slowly been kind of peeling away the layers of who he was, kind of going through a bit of an existential crisis, questioning who he is. Maybe it's the fumes of the hot baths, the fumes of the onsen, but are kind of starting to get to Jaime. So for some reason, he decides to just spill everything about his past, everything that happened when Jaime was tasked with kingsguarding the Mad King, King Aerys. So Jaime informs Brienne about how at one point Mad King Aerys had burned Brandon Stark and Rickon Stark, Ned Stark's father and brother, and Ned Stark was coming down south Robert Baratheon had just killed Rhaegar Targaryen, so Mad King Aerys, he had commanded his pyromancers to stash caches of wildfire amongst the city, and Mad King Aerys had intended that when the Lannister forces would arrive into King's Landing, to light the entire city in a green torch of fire, and Mad King Aerys believed that within this fire, he would be revived as a green golden dragon that would then destroy his enemies. Jaime Lannister, wanting nothing to do with this potential revival of a green dragon, and also, more importantly, not wanting to see the death of so many innocents at King's Landing, decides right then and there to put a sword through Mad King Aerys, and thus save Westeros and King's Landing from any potential wildfire explosion. Unfortunately, Ned Stark arrived at quite an awkward time when Jaime decided to have a little ego trip and sit himself on the Iron Throne after having slain the Mad King. Ned Stark saw this, immediately judged Jaime Lannister as guilty, and here we are now, Jaime Lannister having the infamous moniker of the Kingslayer, where everyone just looks at him as someone who is disgusting. And Brienne relates to Jaime like, oh, why didn't you tell anyone about this? Why did you keep this to yourself all these years? And Jaime's like, who wanted to hear my side? Certainly not Ned Stark. So it's through this pivotal scene that Jaime Lannister, again, starts peeling away his layers. You start seeing kind of a little bit, not so much of a redemption arc, but kind of a turning of a new leaf for Jaime as he kind of starts acknowledging the disgusting things that he's done in his past, despite the fact that those disgusting things kind of saved thousands of lives, and acknowledging the things that he's done, pushing little boys off windows, sleeping with his sister, all these things. There's a little bit of a changing of a character for Jaime, and it makes for such a worthwhile read. Jaime Lannister honestly has the best character arc of this book. But before Jaime can truly get to know who he really is, Roose Bolton decides to send Jaime away with his maester Qyburn, and he's like, oh, go to King's Landing. Tell them that anything that happened to your stump, it was not my fault, it was Vargo Hoat. Absolve me from my crimes, fellow Jaime Lannister. And Jaime is like, alright, that's fine. In the meantime, send Robb Stark my regards. However, despite the fact that Jaime gets to ride free towards King's Landing, Brienne, on the other hand, is commanded to stay at Harrenhal in order to be a new plaything for Vargo Hoat. Brienne is like, why? Roose Bolton, you're a Northman. You're sworn to Robb Stark, to King Robb Stark. I'm representing Catelyn Stark, someone of the North. Why are you keeping me here with Vargo Hoat? And Roose Bolton is like, oh, don't worry. I'm going to tell Catelyn that you're at Harrenhal. I'm going to the wedding as well. I've been invited to this wedding, this famous wedding. You stay here. So Brienne has to stay at Harrenhal with Vargo Hoat as he goes off to the twins. And Jaime, again, kind of starting to come into his own as his own person, as his own character, has a dream where he's underneath a mysterious cavern that doesn't exist in Casterly Rock, and he's being attacked by all these former kings, by all these former people, all these former Kingsguard. He's being attacked, and the only person who stands up to defend him is Brienne of Tarth, his knight in shining armor, his light. And he wakes up, and he tells Qyburn, like, Qyburn, we have to go back to Harrenhal. I left something in Harrenhal. And Qyburn's like, all right, fine, we'll make it fast. So Jaime and Qyburn make their way back to Harrenhal just to see how Brienne is doing, see what she's up to. And sure enough, when he gets back to Harrenhal, he sees that Brienne of Tarth is inside this bear pit, having this mock battle with a bear. However, despite the fact that Brienne is holding her own against the bear, she was given a wooden tourney sword. And Jaime is like, what? You stupid goat, what are you doing? She was given a tourney sword. It's like, well, that's my bear, and I only have one bear. I don't want my bear to be damaged. So Jaime Lannister jumps into the bear pit in an effort to save Brienne, not really knowing that, like, okay, what are you going to do when you jump into the bear pit, Jaime? Like, are you going to rescue Brienne? Okay, what's your big plan here? And Jaime's like, I don't know. I was just kind of thinking on my feet. But right then and there, Qyburn's men immediately put a bunch of arrows into the bear's stomach. The bear dies, and Jaime is able to get Brienne out of Harrenhal. And so Jaime is like, oh, sorry about your sapphires, Vargo Hoat, but the Lannisters always pay their debts. So Jaime, Brienne, and Qyburn decide to finally head out to King's Landing to finally complete their quest. Up further north, Jon Snow arrives at Castle Black in order to inform everyone at Castle Black that, oh, the Wildlings are coming, we gotta shore up our defenses. And Robb and Catelyn, who have been traveling towards the twins, finally make it towards the twins. Along the way, Robb communicates to Catelyn that he intends to legitimize Jon Snow as a true-born Stark, and he also overhears that Euron Greyjoy at one point arrived to Pike. Balon Greyjoy mysteriously fell off some kind of bridge. Euron Crowseye suspiciously arrived here just in time for Balon Greyjoy's timely demise. So that's another one of the 5 kings who is now deceased. Euron Greyjoy has seated himself on the sea stone chair, But anyway, Robb Stark doesn't have much time to think about that because he communicates to Catelyn that he wants to legitimize Jon Snow as Jon Stark. Catelyn has reservations about this, but Robb is like, it doesn't matter. I'm the king and I can legitimize Jon Snow if I want. So they head off towards the twins. Roose Bolton arrives towards the twins. They all meet, commingle, discuss plans for what will happen after the wedding of Edmure Tully and Rosalind Frey, plans about shooing Victarion Greyjoy from Moat Cailin, taking back Winterfell, just all these plans they have. And it is here, ladies and gentlemen, it is here, from this point forward, that A Storm of Swords just gets crazy. So up to this point in the book, I would say A Storm of Swords is a pretty great read. I mean, all in all, it's definitely my favorite book in the series. But up to this point, you kind of don't feel that. It just feels like a Clash of Kings plus. It feels like more of a Clash of Kings, which is certainly not a problem, but it definitely has that same kind of fragmentation going on that a Clash of Kings has, where we check up on a group of characters. Cool, they're doing stuff. Some of it is interesting. Cool, let's check up on another group. And it's just kind of bouncing around, kind of playing hot potato. But it is here where the book just delves into mass pandemonium. And it begins here at the twins with the most infamous sequence of events in the entire series, both in the book and in the TV show Game of Thrones adaptation. And that being the Red Wedding. However, prior to this wedding, Walder Frey meets with Robb Stark, and he just mocks Robb Stark. He's like, oh, you showed up. Oh, finally, the King of the North showed up. Look at you. And so Robb Stark apologizes in person to Walder Frey, like, I'm sorry for betraying you. I'm sorry for all this. And by the way, per Catelyn's recommendation, he's like, oh, Walder Frey, may we be seated underneath your table and have bread and salt. May we have the guest right. Because I'm sorry I didn't explain this before, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of things to explain. But in medieval society, if you were given guest right, then that means you were a guest under someone's home, and everyone agreed to set aside their weapons. This was not a time for war, not a time for battle. It was just a time for parlaying amongst a feast, a parlaying amongst food and drinks, and that was it. So he asks Walder Frey for the right of guest right, and Walder Frey just laughs like, you want bread and salt? Of course, of course. Oh, I can't wait for the wedding tomorrow. The red will run. So during this reunion here with Walder Frey, Grey Wind, who's Robb Stark's direwolf, Grey Wind has been attacking quite a few Freys ever since they arrived at the twins. Grey Wind's just been very on edge, very just agitated. Something is up with these Freys, and Catelyn immediately notices it, and she's like, Robb, pay attention to your wolf. Grey Wind is trying to tell something to Robb Stark here. Hey, these Freys are bad people. What are you doing, Robb Stark? What are you doing? And Robb Stark's like, oh, Grey Wind's just being agitated. He's just being his usual self. These Freys have nothing to hide. They're just here to celebrate this wedding of my Uncle Edmure. Everything's gonna be fine. And Catelyn is like, no, something is up. And sure enough, ladies and gentlemen, sure enough, the next day, during the actual wedding, Catelyn Stark notices that a couple of things are amiss. First of all, the people who are playing in the gallery, the violin players, it's as if they're not musicians. They're playing some really horrible music. They are being served horrible food at this wedding. There's a couple of pavilions that look like they're rigged with something. Oliver Frey, who was Robb Stark's squire, seems to be missing from the wedding feast. A lot of people that Robb Stark really liked and got along with during his trials and tribulations in the Westerlands seem to be strangely missing. But the two things that really signal to Catelyn that something is off are, one, when Edwin Frey does not want to dance with Daisy Mormont and he walks off, Catelyn Stark starts running off towards Edwin Frey, thinking that Edwin Frey is being super suspicious. And two, she hears the musicians play, despite the fact that they were playing horrible music all throughout, for this one song, all of a sudden their musical talents have improved tenfold. And they're playing The Rains of Castamere. And Catelyn is like, oh no. So she finally catches up to Edwin Frey. She sees that he's got chainmail underneath his cloak and slaps Edwin Frey and turns to Robb and yells, Robb! But before she can get a word out, one of the musicians who are in the gallery, they're all secret crossbowmen. They had a crossbow bolt directed towards Catelyn Stark, and they shot her in the chest. And they immediately start shooting all the wedding guests despite the fact that they were given guest right, all the wedding guests underneath Walder Frey's roof. And Walder Frey just takes it in greedily, just laughs it off like, ah, yes, I am able to forgive their apology now. And it's disgusting and it's despicable. And all of these Northmen start falling like flies. The great Jon Umber, Daisy Mormont, a lot of these Northmen. And at one point, Roose Bolton and his Northmen open the doors and arrive into the gallery. And Catelyn couldn't be happier. She's like, oh, we've been saved. But that split-second relief immediately goes away when Roose Bolton's men immediately start killing the other Northmen. And Catelyn is confused. And Robb Stark is on the ground after being stricken by a bunch of crossbow bolts. The great Jon Umber had put a table in the way so that Robb Stark would not be killed by these crossbow bolts, despite the fact that he was shot 3 times already. So everyone is horrified. Catelyn Stark eventually manages to get up from the mess. Robb Stark eventually manages to stand up, and Walder Frey raises his hand, ceasing all the awfulness that is going on. And so Catelyn Stark pleads with Walder Frey, like, Lord Frey, like, you've had enough blood. He is my son, my only son. Let us go and we will forget this. We will swear no vengeance. And Walder Frey is like, oh, the king in the north arises. Oh, sorry about your Northmen being dead. I'll send you an apology. That'll fix it right up, right? My apology, huh? And so Catelyn is just horrified that this man, this horrible man, could be up to this just disgusting thing. So she grabs Walder Frey's mentally challenged boy, called Jingle Bell, and she holds up a knife to his throat. And she's like, Lord Walder, let it end, or I will cut your son's throat. And Walder Frey just dismisses it. It's like, ah, that's a grandson, and he was never of much use. And Catelyn is horrified. And Robb Stark looks at Catelyn, having stood up after having 3 crossbow bolts. And he looks at Catelyn like, Mother. And Roose Bolton, this disgusting vampire Northman who flays skin, this disgusting man who fathered this horrible Ramsay Bolton person, goes up to Robb Stark and, relaying Jaime Lannister's words to Roose, he tells Robb, Jaime Lannister sends his regards. And he kills Robb Stark, stabbing him through the chest with his sword. And Catelyn is horrified. Honoring her word, she slits Jingle Bell's throat and starts laughing maniacally. And all the Freys are like, put an end to it, put an end to it. So one of the Freys goes up to Catelyn, puts a knife to her throat, and slits her throat. And thus, Catelyn Stark, Robb Stark, the great Jon Umber, Daisy Mormont, and virtually the entire Northern Army is laid waste here in this surprise assassination at the Twins. And Walder Frey just laughs and laughs and laughs. And it is this moment, this horrible, horrible moment, that I couldn't stop thinking about when I first read, that I pretty much threw my book across the wall. I was swearing up a storm at Walder Frey. That, again, reinforces the fact that a lot of these characters who you come to know and love, they may have expiration dates. Sure, George R. R. Martin is not the, oh, George R. R. Martin is going to kill all your favorite characters kind of person that a lot of people have given him the reputation for, but he will kill important people. This story has stakes. People will die. If we just read a book thinking that, like, oh, this person is a good guy, they're going to get out of it at some point, yeah, we'll be invested, but not as invested as if we truly believe that this person could see the end of the light of day. And it's horrible, and it's sad, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And a lot of book readers, when they read it back in the year 2000 when this book was first released, I'm sure they couldn't stop thinking about it. And a lot of people who didn't read the book, but they watched the Game of Thrones TV show, when they watched the wedding episode on TV, I'm sure they couldn't stop thinking about it for days and days. It's horrible. And it is this moment that officially, almost convincingly, ends the War of the Five Kings. Meanwhile, Arya and Sandor, who finally arrived to the Twins, but couldn't have arrived at a possibly worse time, they hear a whole bunch of commotion going on inside the Twins, and Arya's like, oh, my mother and brother are inside, I have to go inside. And Sandor Clegane immediately was like, something is afoot. But as soon as Arya tries to go inside and Sandor sees just all the chaos that's happening around the Twins, Sandor immediately knows something's up, kills a couple of the Freys, knocks out Arya, and takes her away from this dreaded place to go who knows where, but away from the Twins. And we receive this information in flashback, but at some point, the Freys, because again, they're not done being horrible, horrible people, they kill Grey Wind, despite the fact that Grey Wind began attacking some of the other Freys and managed to kill a couple of Frey soldiers and men. The Frey men managed to subdue Grey Wind, chop Grey Wind's head off, chop Robb Stark's head off, and sew Grey Wind's head onto Robb Stark's body and parade him around, mockingly saying, "The King in the North, the King in the North." And it is disgusting. And again, we are reminded that Walder Frey, Roose Bolton, and the Freys and Boltons are horrible people, and we hate them. So the news about the Rey wedding makes its way across the land. Tywin Lannister hears about it via raven sent to his Solar, essentially saying that Rosalind Frey was given 2 wolf pelts as a wedding gift, signifying that both Catelyn and Robb have been killed in this wedding. And Tyrion is like, Walder Frey didn't plan this thing on his own. You helped him. And Tywin was like, yes, of course. Those letters that I was writing at the beginning, that was my doing. Roose Bolton will be named the Warden in the North. One of Walder Frey's sons will be named the Lord of Riverrun as soon as we can shoo away Brynden Blackfish Tully from Riverrun, and everything will go according to the Lannisters' plan. However, dear son of mine, when will you put a son in Sansa? And Tyrion is like, when am I supposed to put a son in her? Before or after I tell her about the Red Wedding? And Tywin is like, one way or another, you will put a son in her. And we, the Lannisters, will hold all the cards in Westeros. So again, some just riveting, lovely father-son conversations between Tyrion and Tywin. Stannis and Davos hear about what happened at the Red Wedding. Davos is horrified. Stannis is like, the leeches are working. Balon Greyjoy is dead. Robb Stark is dead. The only one that's left is Joffrey, that disgusting Lannister bastard-born son. And Davos is like, I don't think those leeches had anything to do with anything. I think that was perhaps Euron Crozai Greyjoy, mayhaps, and Walder Frey who did all that stuff. None of your leeches. So at one point, Davos, he's just kind of hanging around in Dragonstone. He's learning to read. And one of the letters that he happens to read is a letter from the North, from Jorah Mormont. Jorah Mormont, having just been defeated by the Whites at the Fist of the First Men, had sent a bunch of ravens throughout all the lands of Westeros, asking for help, asking for more men to help man the wall against the others. Davos sees this letter, he shows it to the Maester, and the Maester is just like, it's just a bunch of rubbish filth. But Davos thinks quick on his feet. He's like, no, there's something here to this. So Davos, again, not wanting Edric Storm to be sacrificed, he finds a way to free Edric Storm from his imprisonment and potentially being burned by Melisandre, has Edric Storm sent out on a ship manned by Salador San, or one of Salador San's men, and then he goes up to Stannis and tells Stannis and Melisandre, like, Edric Storm has been freed. He can no longer be burned by you. And Stannis is like, what? But Davos is like, wait, before you even think about punishing me, there's something I need to show you. And he shows Stannis and Melisandre this letter, and we are left at a cliffhanger. For now. Speaking of troubles at the wall, Jon Snow, who recently informed all the Night's Watch companions at Castle Black that there's an incoming wildling attack, mans the wall against said incoming wildling attack, and immediately repels away the wildlings, including repelling away Ygritte, who in a tragic turn of events was shot down by one of the Night's Watchmen manning the wall. Jon Snow immediately sees that something went wrong. He goes to Ygritte and sees that Ygritte is on her dying breath. And he's like, Ygritte, no. And Ygritte is like, you know nothing, Jon Snow. And Ygritte dies in Jon Snow's arms as Jon cries and cries and cries. He needed to make a decision, and he decided to stick by the wall, stick by the Night's Watch, but that unfortunately meant going against the wildlings. But Jon Snow returns to Castle Black. All the while, Samwell Tarly, who had been traveling with Gilly, Cold Hands, and Gilly's baby, make their way south of the wall, and they meet up with Bran Stark, Jojen Reed, Mira, and Hodor at a place here south of the wall. Samwell Tarly had taken this place called the Black Gate, this mysterious magical gate that's located somewhere underneath the wall, crossed through the Black Gate underground, and managed to make his way towards Bran. And he tells Bran, are you the one I'm looking for? I'm looking for this Bran Stark. And Bran is like, who are you? I'm of the Night's Watch, and I was sent here by Cold Hands. You're to go with Cold Hands to go see the Three-Eyed Crow. And Bran is like, how do you know all this? And Sam's like, don't worry about it. But I need to go back to Castle Black. I need to go back to the wall, to man the wall against a potential wildling attack, against an attack by the others. The others are fierce. They're going to attack again. And Bran, he's like, yes, do that. But before you go, please don't tell my brother Jon Snow that I'm still alive. We need to keep that a secret. We don't want people going after me. And Sam was like, I understand. Your secret is safe with me. And of course, Sam stays true to his word. He returns back to the Wall, returns back to Castle Black, and mum's the word. Sam never tells Jon that Bran is still alive. Bran makes his way north of the Wall, and that's the last we see of him for this Storm of Swords book. Meanwhile, back at King's Landing, everyone is preparing for the upcoming wedding of Joffrey Baratheon / Lannister to Marjorie Tyrell. Tyrion Lannister is having a couple of words with Shae. He doesn't want Shae to be found out. He wants to keep their relationship a secret, but he keeps getting worried that Varys will reveal Tyrion's secret relationship to someone. So in an effort to keep Shae as safe as possible, he wants to marry Shae away to someone else. Shae disagrees. She's like, no, but I'm your Lion of Lannister. And Tyrion is like, sorry, I gotta keep you safe. I gotta do something about this. I can't keep you here. Otherwise, people will find out about you and they'll kill you. So Tyrion leaves Shae alone. He and Sansa head off towards the royal procession. Tyrion hands Joffrey this gift. Joffrey, being his usual sniveling, snobby, psychopathic self, decides to take the new gift he had received from Tywin Lannister, this Valyrian sword that had come from the smelted ice. Decides to break Tyrion's book gift in half with his Valyrian sword and just mocks Tyrion's gift by dancing on the book. Tyrion is more pissed off than ever at this disgusting, psychopathic human being. But at one point, Joffrey makes a comment about how he's no stranger to Valyrian steel. And immediately, in one of the admittedly worst parts about A Storm of this book is near perfection. I love this book, but there's a couple of quibbles that I have with this book, and this is definitely one of them. Tyrion, for some random reason, associates Joffrey's comment about being familiar with Valyrian steel with this just all of a sudden realization that, like, oh my gosh, Joffrey was the one who sent the assassin after Bran and Catelyn in the first book. The assassin, the Catspaw assassin who had a Catspaw Valyrian steel dagger. Joffrey wanted Bran dead. And it is so unsatisfying. I'm like, really? This is how we find out that this happened? This is how we find out just through some flippant comment that Tyrion makes? The reveal is just so blah. Anyway, Tyrion and Sansa attend the wedding. It's what you would think. Joffrey just makes a mockery of everybody. There's a couple of dwarfs that are jousting, making a mockery of Sansa while having one of the dwarfs be Robb Stark. The dwarfs make fool of themselves. They caper around for the amusement of the wedding guests. Tyrion is pissed off. Sansa's seething, but secretly seething on the inside. She's being polite about it. And Tyrion just gets progressively more and more and more drunk throughout the event. However, at one point, Olenna Tyrell comes to comfort Sansa. She's like, oh, my sweet darling, I'm so sorry about what happened at the Red Wedding. She touches her cheek, kind of in a sleight of hand. Her hand kind of slid a little too high up along the hairnet, adjusts the hairnet, and Olenna Tyrell returns to her seat. And Sansa's like, oh, what a nice lady, this Queen of Thorns. I don't know why they call her the Queen of Thorns. She's so nice, this Olenna Tyrell. So at one point, there's a huge pie that comes into the procession. Joffrey cuts the pie with this huge sword. He asks Tyrion to join the jousters. Tyrion is like, oh, haha, that's funny. And Joffrey's like, no, really, you better see the jousters. Also, fill my goblet of wine. So Tyrion grabs a jug of wine, fills Joffrey's goblet, and Joffrey takes a drink. And it's like, haha, it's funny. I love bullying my dwarf uncle, haha. But then he starts to cough, and the cough doesn't stop. And Tyrion is kind of like, are you okay? And Marjorie Tyrell immediately has a realization like, oh my gosh, Joffrey's choking. And Olenna Tyrell is like, oh, help the poor boy, wink. And so everyone runs in. Joffrey is choking. He's freaking out. He's like going, making all these gurgling noises. His face is turning black. Cersei's freaking out. She's like, oh, my poor son, my poor boy. Someone do something. Someone help. Someone help. But it's too late. His windpipe is closed off. And Joffrey Baratheon, one of the 5 kings, is dead. And Cersei Lannister cries, and she's going crazy. And at some point, Sansa disappears off in the madness, who knows where. But prior to Joffrey dying, Joffrey had kind of tried to point a finger at the goblet of wine that he had been drinking prior to his death, alerting everyone to the fact that the goblet of wine is poison. Tyrion grabs the goblet of wine, kind of pours out the contents. He's like, oh, this looks kind of suspicious, whatever is inside this wine. But Cersei misinterprets Joffrey's pointing as pointing towards Tyrion. So Cersei immediately is like, you hated your nephew all along. You hated my son this whole time. You killed my son, despite having zero evidence that Tyrion did anything about this. And Tyrion is like, what the heck are you smoking? Like, I had nothing to do with this. It's like, you did this. Take him. Arrest Tyrion. And then Cersei's like looking around. It's like, where's Sansa? Where did she go? And everyone's freaking out. Sansa somehow disappeared in the madness. Tyrion's like, oh, where's my wife? But it doesn't matter, because Tyrion is under arrest, and Cersei believes Tyrion killed her son. It's one of the book's best moments, not just because this despicable character died, but it's so well done, it's very engaging, it's very immersive, and once again, it's another huge sequence of events that happens in this nearly infinite steal your breath sequence of events that take place throughout these final 500 pages of A Storm of Swords. Sansa runs away. She meets Dantos in the Godswood somewhere here in this insanity of portraits that I have. Dantos, having been one of the people that told Sansa to be ready on the day of the wedding, that, hey, during Joffrey's wedding, I'm going to get you out of the city. Sansa, on cue during Joffrey's choking incident, immediately runs out before anyone suspects that she's missing. Sansa's like, what? You didn't tell me that Joffrey was going to die? It's like, don't worry about that for now. We're going to meet my friend off in the docks. So he takes Sansa off into the docks, and Sansa immediately puzzles out that her hairnet was missing one amethyst, and immediately realizes like, oh, these aren't amethysts. What are these? And it's like, oh, it was some of the poison that was used to poison Joffrey's goblet of wine. So they row out into the sea, and who should they meet? But none other than Peter Baelish Littlefinger. What the heck is this? So previous to this, Littlefinger had gone off to see Lysa Arryn to try to potentially engage in a partnership with the Eyrie and the Lannisters. However, Littlefinger was secretly scheming the death of Joffrey Lannister while he was away, and even prior to when he was away, he had commanded Dantos this entire time to meet Sansa in the Godswood, give her the information about meeting her in the Godswood during the death of Joffrey, and then bringing her to him whenever that fateful day came. Littlefinger previously, also when he was meeting with the Tyrells, he had been telling the Tyrells that like, oh, Joffrey is such a sweet boy during the events of A Clash of Kings, but in reality he had been telling his men to spread rumors about how Joffrey was this horrible individual, thus convincing the Tyrells to plot the death of Joffrey Lannister by scheming their way to try to put this poison that was in Sansa's hairnet in Joffrey's goblet. And thus Littlefinger kind of removes himself from the murder with a couple of layers of people between him. The utmost layer being Tyrion Lannister, who is currently being framed for the said murder. So Sansa meets up with Littlefinger. She's confused. She's like, oh, what's going on? And then Littlefinger is like, oh, Sir Dantos, thank you for bringing her to me. 10,000 gold dragons I owed you? And Dantos is like, yes, 10,000. It's like, okay, here's your 10,000 gold dragons. Commands one of his men to shoot Dantos in the chest and immediately kill Dantos. And Sansa freaks out. She's like, what are you doing? And Littlefinger is like, oh, he's a drunken fool. I don't trust drunk fools, but I trust you, Sansa. And then reveals everything that had transpired in the previous book to get Sansa out of here and get her towards the Eyrie in order to see her aunt Lysa Arryn. Littlefinger also continues to claim that he lost his virginity to Catelyn, and he tells Sansa to always keep your foes confused whenever you play the Game of Thrones. And Sansa takes this to heart, a lesson I'm sure she'll come to learn from in the following books, I'm sure. So after this commotion, Jaime and Brienne, having gone through an adventure of their own, finally arrive at King's Landing. Jaime is just kind of taken aback by this whole thing, reminiscing about all these memories, like, oh, I'm back in King's Landing, like, I'm finally back. He meets up with Cersei at the Sept of Baelor. Cersei is still mourning the death of Joffrey. They proceed to have sex, and then Jaime is like, I don't want to keep our relationship a secret anymore. We should out our relationship. The Targaryens used to wed brother and sister. Why can't we? And Cersei's like, you speak poppycock, Jaime Lannister. If we out our relationship, then say goodbye to Tommen Baratheon's right to claim the Iron Throne. Do you want that to happen? And Jaime's like, yes. And it's like, Cersei's like, you speak lies. You're a fool. And so Tywin Lannister also hears of Jaime's arrival. He goes to see his son. He's like, oh, good to see you back. Anyway, do you want to stop being a Kingsguard? And I will marry you to Marjorie Tyrell now that Joffrey is not around. And Jaime's like, no, I want to keep being a Kingsguard. It is who I am. It is who I have been for life. So Tywin just kind of throws a dragonglass sword at Jaime, a dragonglass sword he had intended to give Jaime, which had been smelted from Ned Stark's ice sword. He's like, fine, here's your stupid sword. You're going to need it. A one-armed man will need all the help he can get. Also, you are not my son. And Jaime's like, okay, that's fine. So Jaime takes the sword and returns to his Kingsguard duties, which is where he meets Loras Tyrell. He sees that Loras reminds Jaime a lot of Jaime when he was a youth. Also, I neglected to mention, but this is also where Jaime Lannister comes to learn that Loras had his younger brother Garland Tyrell cosplay as Renly Baratheon in the Battle of Blackwater Bay back in A Clash of Kings in order to motivate the Tyrell Lannister vanguard to take the fight to Stannis' forces. Thus, the legend of Renly Baratheon's ghost came to be. Oh, and at one point, Brienne also, when she arrived, she was arrested and taken into custody, but then Loras saw that Brienne truly did have nothing to do with Renly Baratheon's death, as Loras still held it against Brienne for the death of Renly Baratheon. Loras Tyrell may have had a secret relationship with Renly under the table, so he held it against her for everything that happened there, but obviously Brienne had nothing to do with Renly's death, so he lets Brienne go. So Jaime kind of has a little, a wonderful moment of existential thought where he sits down, looks at this white book, and in one of the book's coolest scenes, Jaime looks down at this white book and he sees the previous commanders of the King's Guards and what they've done. And then he sees what Jaime's done. You know, obviously he killed Mad King Aerys, but then he sees these blank pages. Jaime realizes that there's no prophecies here. There's no, oh, you know, this will happen this way. Jaime is the writer of his own destiny. He's the writer of his own future. And it can be whatever he wants. So Jaime takes it upon himself from this point forward to be someone who would be proud to see the accomplishments of what he could do, what he could become. So Jaime commands Brienne to Solar, gives Brienne the sword that was given to him. Jaime currently has no use for the sword. Jaime is just a stump. He was given this cool golden arm, but he really can't use it for much these days. He doesn't know how to sword fight. So he gives Brienne this Valyrian steel sword that Tywin gave him and commands Brienne, like, Brienne, this is Oathkeeper. This is your new sword. Go into the Riverlands, go out into Westeros, and try to find Catelyn Stark's two daughters, Sansa and Arya. Do it for the promise that I owe Catelyn. And Brienne, having made a similar promise to Catelyn, agrees and goes off into the Riverlands, where we then see her in A Feast for Crows, venturing forth in order to try to find Sansa and Arya. Also, at one point, Cersei and Jaime again try to rekindle their relationship, and Jaime, similar to Tyrion, flippantly finds out that Joffrey may have been the one to send Bran the Catspaw dagger. Again, one of the less satisfying moments from the book. Jaime is not too happy with this, shoos Cersei away, and again contemplates what he could do with his future. The future of being Tommen's Kingsguard commander. Elsewhere, at some point, Arya and Sandor continue to travel along the Riverlands, kind of rather aimlessly. Sandor trying to take Arya off to the Eyrie in order to ransom Arya off for some gold. Arya wargs into her direwolf Nymeria at some point, rescues this familiar mother-like figure from a river, gets her out of the river, attempts to command this woman to rise, and at one point overhears Thomas Seven Streams, Lem Lemon Cloak, Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, and Angi arrive, and immediately Arya wakes up from her dream. Sansa and Littlefinger arrive at the Fingers at House Baelish, this little tiny tower that Peter Baelish is lord of, essentially lord of nothing. Lysa Arryn had agreed to meet Peter Baelish there, where Littlefinger and Lysa decide to marry. Sansa gets happened upon by this musician who appeared in the first book, who I neglected to mention, called Merillion. Merillion makes advances on Sansa and then attempts to assault her. Sansa wants nothing to do with this. Osmond Kettleblack does away with Merillion, and Sansa is able to sleep in peace. However, in order to keep Sansa's identity a secret, Littlefinger comes up with the plot to have Sansa be Littlefinger's bastard daughter. He calls her Elaine Stone in order to protect her identity and to protect her for potential would-be people who may know who she really is and may want something to do with her. They dye her hair dark brown in order to fool any other people, and Sansa is now Elaine Stone. Back in King's Landing, Tyrion is currently under arrest. He's currently being imprisoned for the alleged murder of Joffrey Baratheon. Cersei has kind of compiled all this fake evidence against Tyrion. She really has nothing, but she's been paying off a lot of people in order to falsify a lot of evidence against Tyrion. So at one point, Tyrion realizes that the only way he's going to get a fair trial is if he does a trial by combat. He asks Bronn if he wants to be his champion in this potential trial by combat. Bronn, knowing that Cersei will likely command Gregor Clegane, the Mountain Who Rides, to be Cersei's champion, Bronn wants nothing to do with a potential duel against Gregor and tells Tyrion, sorry buddy, you're on your own. It's been a pleasure, but my services are needed elsewhere. So Bronn goes on his way, Tyrion's on his own. He believes he has no friends until at one point, in a surprise turn of events, Oberyn Martell, the man who previously mocked Tyrion for not being a monster when Oberyn Martell was off in Casterly Rock, tells Tyrion, Tyrion, I want justice for what happened to my sister, Elia Martell. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, during the events of Robert's Rebellion, Elia Martell was sexually assaulted and murdered by Gregor Clegane. And Tyrion confirms this to Oberyn Martell, saying that Amory Lorch killed the daughter, Rhaenys Targaryen. As far as the mother and son go, Elia Martell and Aegon Targaryen, they were both murdered by Gregor Clegane. And the person who potentially sent out that order was none other than his father, Tywin Lannister. So Oberyn Martell's like, yes, I know, I see it. I've known it all along. Well, I want justice. And Tyrion's like, you're not going to get justice here, bro. Like, there's nothing I can do to help you. This is the worst place for justice. And he's like, well, I will make justice by my own, because I will be your champion. And Tyrion is taken aback by all this. He's like, oh, you will? And Oberyn says yes. So when Tyrion is on stand, he's on trial, Cersei, in a last-ditch effort, turn of events, she brings out Shae. She found where Shae was, this person who Tyrion was trying to keep a secret. She brought her out in order to put the nail in Tyrion's proverbial coffin of evidence. And Shae pretty much outs Tyrion's relationship with her, saying that, oh, he commanded me to call him her Giant of Lannister, despite the fact that she did that willingly. But she's lying on behalf of Cersei because Cersei paid off Shae. So everyone in the crowd laughs and laughs and laughs, except for Tywin Lannister, of course, because Tywin doesn't laugh. And so Tyrion, being sick of all these people, and he finally just goes off on everybody. After all this laughter and mockery, he's like, you know what? I didn't kill Joffrey Lannister, but I wish I did. I wish I had poison for all of you. Stannis should have killed you all. Oh man, I would gladly watch you all swallow that poison, and I would laugh at you. And he goes up to his father and he's like, Lord Tywin, father, like you never loved me. I'm guilty, but not for killing Joffrey. I'm guilty of being a dwarf. And Tywin's like, you're not guilty of being a dwarf. You're on the stand for killing my grandson, Joffrey Baratheon. And he's like, no, I've been guilty of this greater crime of being a dwarf. You never liked me my whole life. I will not get any justice here, so I will turn to the gods. I demand a trial by combat. And Oberyn Martell is like, I have heard this man's words. I will be Tyrion Lannister's champion. And so Cersei just laughs because she already knows that she already had Gregor Clegane under her payroll, because she knew that there was going to be a trial by combat, inevitably, and she had already called Gregor Clegane to show up. So during the day of that fateful battle, where it's Gregor Clegane, the Mountain versus the Viper, and they go head to head, the Viper reveals to Tyrion Lannister, kind of just blurting out his strategies like, oh, Tyrion, once this is all over, you should come to Dorne. Like, Dorne would love to have you. You're a wonderful man. And Tyrion's like, you're a wonderful man, Oberyn. Thanks for doing this for me. He's like, we will crown Myrcella as queen because, you see, in Dorne, we don't just recognize the firstborn male. We recognize the firstborn regardless of whether they're male or female. And because Myrcella is older than Tommen, Myrcella should be the rightful queen of the Iron Throne. You, Tyrion Lannister, and I, the Viper, Oberyn Martell, will rule with Myrcella Baratheon, and we will rule all of Westeros, saying no to these Lannisters. And Tyrion is like, that sounds like a plan to me. Thank you, Oberyn Martell. So Oberyn participates in this battle against Gregor Clegane, and Oberyn's got this victory in the bag. All he needs to do is just deliver the killing blow. He's like, no, I want to hear you confess. Who gave you the order to rape and murder Elia Martell and Aegon Targaryen? Who gave you the order? And Gregor Clegane takes that moment to finally recover, sweeps Oberyn Martell's legs, puts his fingers over Oberyn Martell's eyes, crushes in the eyes. Oberyn Martell screams in pain. He's like, yup, it was me. I raped her, killed her, and murdered her children. And then crushes Oberyn Martell's head. In this horrific incident in both the book and show, Oberyn Martell's paramour screams in shock. Tyrion can't believe it. His one chance at freedom is gone. Oberyn Martell is dead, and Tyrion Lannister is left to rot in the black cells of King's Landing, as Tywin Lannister judges Tyrion guilty and soon to be executed for the murder of Joffrey Baratheon. Off in the east, Dany, recently having taken over Yunkai with the help of her Unsullied companions and the help of Daario Naharis, they knock on the doorstep of Meereen. Meereen now being their final destination after hearing that Meereen has all stores of food, everything going on for them. Obviously, the Meereenese slave masters want nothing to do with Dany. So Dany sends out a couple of people to infiltrate the sewers of Meereen, take over Meereen from the inside, and open the doors for Dany because Meereen is now under the hands of Daenerys Targaryen. Everyone happily celebrates, but Jorah finally takes this moment to out this Arstan Whitebeard and tell Daenerys that, Dany, this person is not Arstan Whitebeard. He's not this lowly squire that he claims to be. He is one of the most famous Kingsguardmen, known as Barristan Selmy, and he let your father, Mad King Aerys, die all those years ago. And Barristan tells Dany, well, actually, Jorah Mormont, your companion who's been your bestie friend all these books, he was actually previously following you only because he was following the commands of Robert Baratheon, the king who had killed Rhaegar Targaryen. He was following his orders to spy on you so that he could give Robert Baratheon information and potentially have you killed. And so Dany is shocked to hear all this. She's like, both of you, get out of here now. I want nothing to do with you. So eventually, after a couple of days of kind of mulling things over, she comes to her senses. She allows Barristan Selmy to come back into her fold after Barristan Selmy promises to be her Kingsguard person, her Queensguard, I should say, person. But she is a little bit more harder on Jorah Mormont. Not only is she disgusted by that kiss he implanted on her a couple of days ago, but she's also disgusted with him over the fact that he had only been following Dany because he was doing so under the orders of Robert Baratheon in order to spy on her and reveal any potential information to Robert Baratheon. She wants nothing more to do with this man and sends him out to the waste. Just like he was exiled from Westeros, he's now exiled from Dany's court. Dany, after thinking things over, she also reveals to Barristan Selmy that she wants to stay in Meereen for the foreseeable future. So she decides to stay behind in Meereen and learn to rule Meereen in order to develop her skills of how to be a queen in the future. All the while in the Wall, Jon, who continues to repel further wildling attacks, including an attack from a turtle and an additional attack from Mance Rayder, is currently being overwhelmed here at the Wall. Donal Noy at some point dies at a gate tunnel during one of these wildling attacks. Jon Snow and the Night's Watch seem to be on their own here until Alliser Thorne, with the help of the newly arrived Jon Slint, who was exiled away from King's Landing in the previous book for having murdered Robert Baratheon's bastard daughter at a brothel, comes to Castle Black in order to take the helm away from Jon Snow as being the leader here at the Night's Watch. He obviously is disgusted with Jon Snow because Alliser Thorne has revealed all this stuff to Jon Slint about who Jon Snow is. They command Jon Snow to go to Mance Rayder's camp in an effort to parley with Mance, but secretly have Mance Rayder killed under the table. You know, betrayal of guest right, red wedding shenanigans, the usual. So when Jon goes to see Mance Rayder, Mance is not too happy with Jon. He's like, oh, you show yourself again, Turncloak. So Mance has a quick conversation with Jon, and he's like, I will give you one last chance, Jon. I'm going to give you this Horn of Winter that me and my wildling companions found out in the middle of the snow. If you will allow my wildling companions to cross through the wall, south of the wall, we won't pay any of your King's Landing taxes or whatever, but we will settle south of the wall, and we will help repel against the true threat that lies north of the wall, the others. So Jon contemplates this quickly, but before Mance can say anything further, there's a huge commotion that happens around the wildling encampments, around the wildling tents. Mance is like, what the heck is going on? And sure enough, horses come, ironclad men come. And so Jon Snow thinks that, oh, did my brother come to save me? No, my brother's dead. Did Robert Baratheon rise from the dead and come to save us? But Jon quickly realizes that it's not Robert Baratheon who's here, but rather the one true king, Stannis Baratheon, having paid attention to Davos, having taken his advice from the letter that Davos read, has come to the north of the wall to save Jon Snow and save the Night's Watch from the wildlings. And Jon Snow couldn't be happier. He's like, oh, the one true king has arrived. Sir Stannis, your grace, Stannis Baratheon. And I'm like, yes, Stannis the Menace, the one true king. Meanwhile, further south, Arya and Sandor Clegane arrive at the inn at the crossroads, just wanting to have a little bit of a drink before they head out on the rest of their adventure toward the Eyrie. And who should they see but the Tickler, Polliver, and his squire? Three people who Arya has unfortunately come to meet in the previous book of Clash of Kings when these men had captured Arya, Hot Pie, and Gendry and were burning the Riverlands. Arya wanting nothing to do with these people, and Sandor Clegane being agitated by these people, the Tickler consistently heckling the Hound for having deserted the Lannisters, has had enough and starts fighting these people. Arya takes it upon herself to stab the squire as well, and while she's at it, she managed to stab the tickler as well, consistently telling him, "Where are you hiding the gold? Where are you hiding treasure?" In retribution for the tickler consistently asking the villagers the same thing before torturing his victims to death. So Arya and Sandor manage to kill these disgusting people, and they make their way towards the salt pans in an effort to take a ship that gets them to the Eyrie. However, on the way, Sandor, having sustained injuries from the battle here at the inn at the crossroads, is not feeling all to himself. At one point, he falls off his horse and can't make it any further. So he asks Arya, "Arya, please give me the gift of mercy. Do you know where the heart is? Stab me in the heart and let me die." Arya, having had her frustrations with Sandor Clegane, wanting nothing to do with Sandor, blaming him for the death of Micah, essentially blaming him for everything, says no and decides to leave Sandor. And Sandor's like, "No, please, kill me, I want to die." But Arya, being a cold person, lets him cling with the little bit of life he has left. So she rides a horse to the salt pans, sells the horse, gets a little bit of silver, tries to hitch a ride on a Braavosi ship. The Braavosi captain says, "No, child, no amount of silver will allow you to come on this ship." It's like, "Oh, I want to go north of the wall." And it's like, "Oh, there's nothing in the north but pirates, and there's nothing for me there. It's like, we're going home." It's like, "Where's home?" "We're going to the free city of Braavos." And immediately something in Arya's head clicks, as she realizes that she had previously met a Braavosi man, someone who is in Braavos who gave her something of value. And so she pulls out the thing that she's been carrying this entire time, the iron coin that she's had with her. And she's like, "Wait." And so the captain is like, "More silver won't help you, girl." And she's like, "It's not silver, it's iron." And so she shows the iron coin to the Braavosi captain. And so the Braavosi captain is taken aback by this piece of iron. He's like, "How did you get this?" And Arya, having been commanded previously by Jaqen H'ghar of what to say in this situation, immediately giving her best Braavosi impression, tells the Braavosi captain, "Valar Morghulis." And the Braavosi captain, kind of mesmerized, looks at Arya with tears in his eyes, and he tells her, "Valar Dohaeris, of course you shall have a cabin." And Arya rides on this Braavosi ship off to Braavos to meet Jaqen potentially. Who knows? But we'll have to wait and see in A Feast for Crows. But the book doesn't end there. Oh my gosh, whew. What an eventful last couple of pages here. It does not end there, because Tyrion, still being imprisoned in King's Landing, still being imprisoned in the Black Cells, having nowhere to turn, all of a sudden gets a surprise visit from his dear older brother, Jaime Lannister. And Tyrion is like, "Oh, Jaime." And Jaime is like, "Come on, let's go." Tyrion's like, "Oh, what the heck is going on?" And Jaime is like, "Come on, I came here to rescue you." It's like, Tyrion's like, "Oh, thank you, but why?" And Jaime is like, I owe you a debt." It's like, "Whoa, what debt is that?" And so it is here where Jaime reveals to Tyrion that so many years prior, Tyrion, who had fallen in love with this girl when he was 15, who wanted to marry this girl, was told that this girl was nothing but a prostitute, was nothing but a whore. And Jaime tells Tyrion, "This girl was never a whore. I was told to lie on Tywin's behalf to you that this girl was a whore in order for you not to marry someone who was of low birth." And Tyrion, being super pissed off that his father once again interfered and intervened in something that was not meant to be intervened and interfered, is pissed off at Jaime, pissed off at Tywin, pissed off at the world. And he pushes Jaime and he says, "How dare you lie to me all these years? All these years, I thought I'd fall in love with a girl, and it turns out she was a whore. Well, now it turns out she wasn't a whore. She was real. She actually loved me." And Jaime was like, "I'm so sorry." And Tyrion's like, "Apology isn't enough. Get me out of here." So Jaime opens the door, Tyrion pushes him, and storms out. He meets Varys, who was kind of coerced into helping Jaime. Despite, Varys having a friendship with Tyrion in A Clash of Kings, Varys wasn't doing Tyrion any favors here in this book. So Tyrion commands Varys, like, "All right, Varys, get me out of this castle. Get me out of here." And Varys is like, "It shall be done." But before they can leave, Tyrion tells Varys, like, "Actually, hold a moment. I need to see my father about something." And Varys is like, "This is a terrible idea. We got to get out of here." And Tyrion's like, "No, Varys. There's something I must tell my father." So Tyrion, crawling through the secret tunnels that Maegor the Cruel had created centuries prior to the events of the Game of Thrones, climbs one of the ladders of these secret tunnels, accesses the chamber of the Hand of the King's Tower, the Hand's Tower, in order to pay Tywin a little visit. But who should he see there in Tywin's bed, but not Tywin Lannister, but the person who had been in a secret relationship with Tyrion this whole book, this whole series, Shae. And Tyrion disgusted that Shae was sleeping with Tywin, that Tywin was a hypocrite, despite the fact that he hated prostitutes and whores all this time. Tywin was actually sleeping with a prostitute. And Tyrion is super pissed off at Shae, so he takes the Hand of the King chain, despite the fact that Shae tells Tyrion, which is true, that the only reason she was standing on trial against Tyrion was because she was paid, and she didn't mean anything she said. But Tyrion is in a vengeful spree. He's super mad. He's like, nope. So he chokes the life out of Shae. Hands of gold are always cold, but a woman's hands are warm, and kills her right then and there. He drops the lifeless Shae on Tywin's bed, and then goes to pay Tywin, his father, a little visit, who's off in the privy, going number 2, taking a dump off somewhere. Tyrion opens the door with a crossbow, and Tywin is like, Tyrion. And Tyrion is like, you've always wanted me dead, father. Well, now I have the upper hand here. And Tywin tries to lie his way out like, oh, son, I wasn't going to actually have you killed. I wasn't actually going to have you executed for the death of Joffrey. Of course I knew it wasn't you all along. You were going to take the black. And Tyrion's like, you've always wanted me dead. Well, you lied to me about Tysha. He's like, oh, Jaime told you. Son, this is not how you do it. Like, you've always been my son. I've always loved you. And Tyrion is like, nope, not going to work this time, father. And Tywin is like, why? Sad about that whore Tysha. And so Tyrion, having heard enough, shoots Tywin in the chest. He's like, oh, you shot me. And Tyrion is like, oh, very observant of you, father. You've always been one smart aleck. And Tywin is like, oh, I have no son. And Tyrion is like, oh, I'm Ygritte Small. So Tyrion shoots again, and Tywin gets shot in the chest a second time. And this time for real, Tywin meets his demise. And Tyrion, despite the fact that knowing it was a jape all along, Tywin having been on a toilet and relieving himself in death, Tyrion smells the defecation and realizes that, in the end, I guess Tywin Lannister did not in fact shit gold. So Tyrion Lannister heads with Varys. Varys gets him on a ship, and Tyrion Lannister gets on a ship off to Essos. To where? We'll have to see in the next book, or in A Dance with Dragons. But the story is still not over, because off in the wall, Melisandre commands Jon to go visit the one true king, Stannis Baratheon. And Stannis, having just recently arrived to the wall, tells Jon, like, Jon, I know your father as a man of honor, so I know you as a man of honor. So all these things that Jon O'Slint and Alistair Thorne are telling me, I know they're pure lies. So Jon, I want to make you one of my bannermen. I want to make you one of my lords. So Jon, I'm going to cut you a deal. I am the king, so I can do this. I am offering to legitimize you, Sir Jon Snow, as Jon Stark, Lord of Winterfell, and I want to marry you to Val, Dalla's sister, Dalla being Mance Rayder's wife who died in childbirth, thus able to give birth to Mance Rayder's son. So I want to marry you off to Dalla in order to create a partnership with the Wildlings, and I want you to be Jon Stark, Lord of Winterfell. And Jon is taken aback by this. He's always wanted to be a Stark. He always wanted to be Lord of Winterfell. But he knew, given his position as a bastard-born son, it just was never going to happen. But Jon mulls this over. Pretty sweet deal. You got Winterfell, Lord of Winterfell, the one true king as your boss. That sounds pretty great. But the more Jon mulls it over, the more something just nags at him. On the one hand, if he were to take Stannis' offer, he would have to adopt the Lord of Light as his official religion and renounce the old gods, which means burning the Heart Tree, the Weirwood Tree, in Winterfell. And Jon Snow is not sure he can do that, given the thousands of years of history that the Weirwood Tree network has in the north. And in addition to that, there's something about the wall that calls to Jon. His position as a Night's Watchman. He wants to be a Night's Watchman. Well, eventually a decision is made for Jon. Not by Jon himself, but by his fellow Night's Watch companions, particularly Samwell Tarly, who, in a bid in order to try to get Jon O'Slint not to be the Lord Commander, he puts Jon Snow's name in the cauldron, and thus Jon Snow, after a almost unanimous amounts of tallied votes, is now the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Thus, Jon Snow is married to his duty as a Night's Watchman and can no longer be Stannis' Lord of Winterfell. But Jon isn't too displeased. He's pretty happy being in the Night's Watch, and he's happy being the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. So here he'll stay for the foreseeable future. Off in the Eyrie, Sansa, who's still with Littlefinger and Lysa, she's super sad about everything that has transpired thus far, super sad about having lost her father, mother, older brother. Apparently her brothers Bran and Rickon are also deceased as well. All her family is gone. Arya's missing. She doesn't know who to turn to. She has a moment where she just goes outside in the Eyrie, decides to build a little snow castle, a little Winterfell snow castle. Littlefinger, Peter Baelish, sees this and he's like, "Oh, Sansa, you're so beautiful." And he helps her finish the Winterfell castle. And in a moment of, I don't know, perhaps a little horniness, perhaps a little planned horniness, Peter Baelish, Littlefinger kisses Sansa. Just a sloppy wet kiss on the mouth. And Sansa's like, what? But maybe this kiss was planned, because Lysa Arryn sees this and commands Sansa to come to the seat where she's sitting. Lysa is super pissed off at Sansa. She saw the kiss between Sansa and Littlefinger. She admits that it was Littlefinger who Lysa lost her virginity to, not Catelyn like Littlefinger claims. She's super mad that Sansa's trying to take her man away. So she's about to have Sansa thrown out of the moon door, this door that's on the wall, the side wall of the Eyrie, where basically people who are being executed get thrown out from and fall to their high bloody deaths below. But before Lysa can deliver the killing push to Sansa, Littlefinger comes into the room. He's like, "My wife, my dear, what are you doing? That is Sansa, that is your niece." And so Lysa just cries like, "What am I doing, Littlefinger?" And Littlefinger's like, "It's okay, it's okay." And so Lysa tells Littlefinger like, "Oh, Littlefinger, I've always done everything you've told me. I poisoned Jon Arryn like you told me to do at the very beginning of the first book." Thus, Littlefinger, in this moment, it is revealed that Littlefinger has been the mastermind behind this whole thing, this whole sequence of events, this whole series was all masterminded by Peter Baelish, Littlefinger himself. Littlefinger asked Lysa to poison Jon Arryn. Littlefinger asked Lysa to lie to Catelyn Stark and tell her that it was the Lannisters who killed Jon Arryn. Littlefinger was the one who created the circumstances for Joffrey Baratheon's death. Littlefinger has been behind everything all along, and Lysa just spills the beans, and Sansa's horrified to learn all this, and Littlefinger is like comforting, and it's like, "Oh, yes, it's okay, I know. I've always only loved one woman." And Lysa's like, "Oh, thank you, Littlefinger, thank you, Peter Baelish." Only cat. And Lysa's tears turn to horror as Littlefinger pushes Lysa out of the moon door towards Lysa's death. And Meereen chooses this moment to come into the room and is like, "What's going on?" And so Littlefinger then tells the bannermen, "Gentlemen, lords, that man, Meereen, killed Lady Lysa. It was Meereen all along." So Merylion's like, "What the heck is going on?" So the men arrest Meereen, and Littlefinger just kind of schemes and laughs to himself. "Ah, yes, all going according to plan." As Sansa's horrified, having learned that Littlefinger has been behind everything all along. Lysa's done so much damage, and Littlefinger just killed Lysa. Wow. But the story doesn't end there. It does not end there. Oh my gosh, all these plot reveals. Because, as it turns out, in the Riverlands somewhere, a lowly Frey, Merritt Frey, one of the lowly Freys who is mocked by his Frey siblings, his Frey father, for essentially doing nothing during the events of the Red Wedding, has been tasked by his Frey siblings to try to rescue a fellow Frey that is currently being ransomed elsewhere by the Brotherhood Without Banners. So Merritt Frey finds the Brotherhood Without Banners like, "Oh, where's my Frey companion, my Frey sibling?" So Thomas Sevenstreams, Lem Lemoncloak, and Angie showed him the Frey sibling hanged, and Merritt is like, "What? No, I have the gold." They take his gold, take hold of him, arrest him, tie him up, and then put him to a tree with a noose around his neck. He's like, "What? No, I did everything you said. I brought you the gold. I brought everything." It's like, "Oh, sorry. You're a Frey, right? You're Merritt Frey? Well, you're under arrest for the whole Red Wedding thing. We're going to execute you now." It's like, "What? Why? Under what charges?" And so then it is here where the Brotherhood Without Banners, Thomas Sevenstreams, brings out their new boss, a deceased Catelyn Stark, who now goes by Lady Stoneheart. Lady Stoneheart, and all her horrible horrorness, just a devastating, vengeful, hate-filled woman, sees this Merritt Frey with eyes that could kill. And Merritt Frey is horrified. "No, we killed you." And it's like, "Sorry, she's not dead. She's alive. Thoros of Myr gave her the kiss of life, so now she's one of us." And Merritt is like, no, it can't be." So they ask Lady Stoneheart, Lady Stoneheart, is he one of the people responsible for the Red Wedding? And Lady Stoneheart looks at him, at Merritt Frey, with cold dead eyes, and nods her head. And Thomas Sevenstream's like, all right, sorry, buddy, you're guilty. So Lem Lemon Cloak hangs Merritt Frey, and Lady Stoneheart looks on in hate-filled horror glee as another Frey has been deceased, and Lady Stoneheart's vengeful mission to kill all Freys and Boltons that were associated with the death of her long-lost son. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we end A Storm of Swords. Oh my gosh, that was long. I don't know how long this will wind up being, but this took hours and hours to record. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it's been a satisfying refresher for you guys. Going through this book, I've come to realize that I love A Song of Ice and Fire. I love A Storm of Swords. It might be my favorite. I'm not sure. I'd have to reread The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, but this is definitely one of the best fantasy novels in existence. I'm so grateful to have read it, and I'm so grateful that you guys joined me along on this summary to go through the events of this book. Thank you guys so very much for watching this video. If you could do me a huge favor, once again, leave a like, comment, consider subscribing to this video. It really does mean the world to me if you do that. This took a lot of work to make. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. And until next time, The Advocate, out.